I just want to get this out of the way a little bit more. Okay. All right, let's escape out of this. Okay, a little bit more. Okay. All right, let's escape out of this.
The SMC?
Okay, a little bit more.
Yep. Okay. Let's put it on the desktop.
Okay.
Happened pretty quick.
All right, let's escape out of
Right
this.
there. And we have what time is it? 9:15. The SMC?
Okay, a little bit more.
Yep. And then we're going to go, let's see, I'm looking for Brandon on the desktop.
Okay.
Hey, there he is. Perfect time.
All right, let's escape out of
Right
this.
there. All right, and next. 9:15. The SMC?
Okay, a little bit more.
Yep. And then we're going to go, let's see, I'm looking for, that's what happens to my phone.
Okay.
Hey, there he is. Perfect time. I've got
right,
PowerPoint
escape
folders
out of
right
this.
there, whatever. All right, and next. 9:15. The SMC?
Okay, a little bit more.
Yep. And then we're going to go, let's see, I'm looking for, that's what happens to my phone. I'll need the PDF on it.
Okay.
Hey, there he is. Site, anyway. I've got
All right,
PowerPoint
let's escape
folders
out of
right
this.
there, whatever. Oh, well, that's the beauty of the PDF, though, and also posting to the site.
Okay, a little bit
I
more.
don't email any of this stuff anymore, right? So it's so nice. So I'm going to have you see my desktop here, and we got you.
Okay.
Hey, there he is. Site.
I've got
Right there. So the sequence of events is me. Well, that's the beauty of the minute, and then you'll roll PDF, and also posting to the site.
a little bit
I
more.
don't email Eric's, and then so that's 11 o'clock. So I'm going to have you see my desktop here, and we got you. Hey, there he is. Site. Right there. Usually it's presentation. Well, that's the beauty of the minute, and then PDF, and also posting to the site. I don't as long as if you're not feeling it until 11 o'clock. So I'm going to have you see my desktop here. Let me go ahead and there it is. That reminds me of all big speakers back in the 80s. That's my goal. I don't as long as if you're not feeling it until 300. So I'm going to have you see my desktop here. There it is. Slide turning around talks about it. That reminds me of. So he just has this encyclopedia. Right. And it's always a hot mic. So I can't turn it on and off. Hey, Eric, do you have your slides? How's that work? Oh, okay. Right. I have any connection. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll do it during a break, or should I just, you want to time me out? It might. At the break. Okay. Yeah. Right. Yep. I have any connection. Any connection down here. So during the break, we'll get that set up. Yep. Well, we'll do it during a break, or should I just, you want to time me out? It might. Yep. I have any connection down here. So during the break, we'll get that set up. Yep. Well, we'll do it during the break, or should I just, you want to time me out? It might. I have any connection down here. So during the break, we'll get that set up. Yep. Well, we'll do it during the break, or should I just, you want to time me out? All right. Hey, hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. If this is our microphone that I have right now, but I need to talk a little bit in the microphone to make streaming work. So thanks everybody for being here today. We've got a lot of. If you haven't been here. All right. Hey, hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. If this is not been to a forum. This is our microphone that I have right now. So all my presenters. But I need to talk a little bit in the microphone to make streaming work. All right, now I got a couple others that are not here today. But in any event, welcome. All right. What I like to do is hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. This is quick, not name and where you're from. This is our microphone that I have right now. But I need to talk a little bit in the microphone to make streaming work. All right, now I got a couple others that are not here today. But in any event, welcome. All right. What I like to do is hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. This is our microphone that I have right now. But I need to talk a little bit in the microphone to make streaming work. All right, now I got a couple others that are not here today. But in any event, welcome. All right. What I like to do is hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. This is our microphone that I have right now. But I need to talk a little bit in the microphone to make streaming work. All right, now I got a couple others that are not here today. But in any event, welcome. All right. What I like to do is hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. This is our microphone that I have right now. But I need to talk a little bit in the microphone to make streaming work. All right, now I got a couple others that are not here today. But in any event, welcome. All right. What I like to do is hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. This is our microphone that I have right now. But I need to talk a little bit. So, all right, now I got a couple others that are not here today. But in any event, welcome. All right. What I like to do is hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. This is our microphone that I have right now. But I need to talk a little bit. So, all right, now I got a couple around you, Sean. Right? I'm trying to bring you out. Welcome. All right. What I like to do is hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. We have a kind of a microphone that I have right now. But I need to talk a little bit. So, all right, now I got a couple around you, Sean. Right? I'm trying to bring you out. Welcome. All right. What I like to do is hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. We have a kind of a microphone that I have right now. But I need to talk a little bit. So, all right, now I got a couple around you, Sean. Right? I'm trying to bring you out. Welcome. All right. What I like to do is hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. We have a microphone that I have right now. But I need to talk a little bit. So, all right, now I got a couple around you, Sean. Right? Welcome. All right. What I like to do is hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. We have a microphone that I have right now. But I need to talk a little bit. So, all right, now I got a couple around you, Sean. Right? Welcome. All right. What I like to do is hopefully you can all hear me, and I'm not. We have a microphone that I have right now. But I need to talk a little bit. So, all right, now I got a couple around you. Some points relevant for those of us in Alaska. If you don't know, data, services, partnerships, and education is really the focal, has been for 3 years for the smart communities. It initiated 3 years ago, next month, and actually 3 years ago this April, with Eric and his team. But we've had them quarterly, these events, any number of topics. But it's about really sharing data that we're already collecting, building some apps, visualizing that information in a better way. Education, really vis-a-vis this forum. And then partnerships. There's a lot of partnerships that we don't really even see, but between school districts and the borough, and even with utilities in a borough, be it Muni or be it Matsu borough. And we actually have more recently something in the past year between Denali Borough and MTA. So this is the idea is really through this forum is just a form of exchange, networking, learning about new ideas and what data we might not be aware of. And real importantly is don't create it again, just use what's existing. Forum goals, quick 7 items, right? So it's provide useful information and services to the public, reducing duplicate data and tools. I do a lot of, my firm does a lot of work with the state, and you can see this redundancy throughout different state agencies, let alone where else among local government those redundancies exist. And the idea is to still identify authoritative data sources and use those data sources rather than copying them, use them through an API of some sort. So we're just, again, it keeps us focused on the same information source regardless of how we're presenting it to our customers or to our residents. Tee up information for value-added services. This came up on our initial forum, is just make data available for crowdsourcing purposes. You can't create all the apps inside a government agency, perhaps a business, or a tech shop wants to create an app. Matsu Health Foundation perhaps wants to consume some data to better provide an application for a lot of the folks that it serves. So that's the idea, is providing some data set that's accessible to public, nonprofits, and so on. Better informed public, enabling citizens to be more engaged in their government vis-a-vis notifications, alerts, more information, so it's not so it's more transparent, right? Enable employees to be more efficient through workflow and so on, and also enabling communities to create their own smart community. It doesn't just need to be a couple different agencies or a couple boroughs, but everyone can have their own way to have a smart community. Again, you hear that term on and on. There's a hype cycle about the word smart communities or smart cities. A lot of it's IoT driven, a lot of terminology. But in this particular case, right, we're talking really about exchanging data, exchanging lessons learned, exchanging applications, and forming some partnerships, principally here in Alaska. So we're helping each other out. A lot of topics and concepts. So I just wanted to call this out. You probably see a lot of this. I see a ton of this. But it's transformation, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, big data. A lot of big words. What does that all mean? We had a little bit on that last forum on digital transformation. But to me, this is what keeps me more grounded in what we're doing. It's data sources. Geospatial data is a big part of smart communities. Data sharing, the interfaces I mentioned, mobile access. I want to be able to do something wherever I am and access that information. And then certainly cybersecurity. It's a very common theme across the country, but more and more people are steeped in it, particularly since last summer. Our unfortunate poster child for cybersecurity needs and awareness, right? So, and this is just some examples. I've been asked when I talk about smart communities, well, what are you talking about? It's partnering and sharing data, sharing the costs to share perhaps a licensing or a data platform, coordinate purchasing and licensing, local governments with a state purchase contract, that sort of thing. Build apps across departments, agencies, and organizations. A local agency might have a custom app and they want to build for a particular department. Well, hold on. What other departments might need that functionality? Let's make sure it's seamless across these and so they all have access to that particular type of application. Automated workflow. There is the trash app, for example, a small example, but the trash app is the problem reporter app that the Matsu uses. I know the Muni has similar apps, but the idea is to build, to improve processes by taking in the data, and that data is actually pushed in workflow. We all know in our work that we do, I would presume, what workflow means, but it's enabling that, to streamline the process, pulling out inefficiencies, and sharing the same piece of information all the way through to an endpoint. Making data digitally available, not just PDFs or an Excel spreadsheet, and then sharing our successes and lessons learned, and hopefully that's what we're doing here. And then finally, just as a little bit of an example, I kind of went through my mental checklist for the past couple of years, but and this will be available online after the presentation, but the Matsu Problem Reporter, Parcel Viewer, driveway permitting, workflow, and mobile application, all its GIS platform. Similarly, Muni has a GIS platform, has an open data platform. We have a presentation two forums ago, last August, about the homeless housing application and workflow, coordinating social services with, usually the intake is a report to the police department, but then the police department are now better engaged with social services and parks and recreation to clean homeless camps, as well as enable those people to perhaps get into become a better housing situation. So we had some officers here presenting that, as well as the Muni's GIS team were sharing what they had done for the city of Anchorage. They also have a geographic data information center at the Muni. Denali and Borough and MTA are working on standardized addressing. Just mutually, they had mutual goals that they needed to accomplish, and so they made an arrangement for Denali Borough to do something and for MTA to provide the Denali Borough something. Again, I think it's a rather informal partnership, but it has to do with mapping and addressing, and it helped both organizations out. Today we're talking about GeoPortal and then doing better information about right-of-way information across different agencies and make that public and consumable. Common data formats, the DCRA, Community Information Portal, and then the Alaska Energy Data Gateway. The last three we've seen presented in the past year or so. So if any of this is you're curious about, we're all doing applications. Some more than others in different places. Ideally, the GeoPortal becomes a bit of a single starting point, if you will, to learn. If I didn't know anything, could be a jump-off place to find other places in other boroughs or other data sets available to us in Alaska. So that is a quick bit. I just wanted to really share, and I think I have a minute to share this, and I have to be less sophisticated about this. And I wanted to give you 2 minutes. And of course, it's not working. And Charles not here. Okay. So with that, I tell you what, since Charles not here, I'm going to go ahead and present that. It'll be a nice intro for Eric into your application section at 10:30, because it's principally on the driveway process. All right. So with that, I'm right on schedule, and we have Brendan Babb from Municipality of Anchorage and his innovation team. So.
Hi, my name is Brendan Babb. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at the Municipality of Anchorage. I started in May of 2017, or actually May of 2016. And last time I gave a talk was in August of 2017. I was talking about some of our open data portal at the Muni. And we were lucky to get a Bloomberg grant for $1.5 million for 3 years to start an innovation team, and there were 7 other cities at the same time. And I just wanted to give kind of an overview of what we've been doing. We're on the first floor of the Muni. We're where you used to early vote if you went to the city hall. And we have Post-its and orange walls and all the kind of startup trappings that you would have. But I wanted to go over some of the stuff we have been working on, because we're actually, after being very deep in research, are actually starting to make things. So, yep, okay. Sorry. All right, So the first thing is I get to fail a lot, which is hard to do in government because you often get beaten up for wasting taxpayer dollars, you get beaten up in the press. But I think it's crucial to being able to innovate and come up with new stuff. My background's in mathematics and computer science, and I did some work on some Mars rover image compression, and I would literally write programs that would fail continuously over and over and eventually evolve and find better solutions. So I think one challenge is having the freedom, the cover to fail. So if things go well, I find departments that have great ideas. I have a small ego. I have a bunch of cool ideas, but I don't need to bring any ideas to city government. All the frontline staff, everyone in city government has at least 30 or 40 ideas on how to make government better. And I would say everyone in the Valley and Anchorage has 3 or 4 ideas on how to make the city better. And the trick is to find those ideas, but people are also busy 40 hours a week delivering great services to residents of Alaska. So they don't have as much time to dig into an idea. I used to use Photoshop a lot and for my job, and I would do things a long way, and I knew the whole time that there was probably a 1 keystroke thing that would be less than the 20 minutes it took to do it, but I was always on deadline, so I always just did this thing. I always wished I could have maybe 3 days to learn how to use Photoshop better. And what happens is, as government gets under-resourced and we have people working harder, there's less time to learn these new skills. So I'm just gonna do a brief over this. So this is, my background's in genetic algorithms. Genetic algorithms are basically, you have a random population of solutions that don't know anything about the problem they're trying to solve other than the fitness. This is trying to evolve a car. And it just comes up with 5 or 6 random shapes, X number of wheels, and then it measures how well it does by how far it drives along here. And if you run this long enough, it starts to look kind of like a car or something different. But it doesn't know, you're not telling it what a car is, it's just failing over and over again, and just like evolution, getting better and better. So that's the work I did on Mars rover image compression and working at UAA, and we were able to come up with something that worked 5% better, but that makes a big difference when you're sending stuff from Mars down here. This is another example of evolved NASA antennas. And I swear, if you said, so for a particular spectrum, these antennas work better than any other antenna they had before. But if you came in with the one on the right and said, boss, this is a better antenna, he'd probably say, you're fired. You just folded a paperclip up, get out, clear your desk. But it turns out this actually works better for that particular spectrum. And the nice thing about genetic algorithms is they don't have any preconceived biases. They have more time, if you run them on supercomputers or GPUs, they have times to just repeat, which is really hard for humans because we come in and we have a limited amount of time to make an impact on something. So we have to, when we go to build a house, we don't start from scratch. We know certain ways that work. And you want to find that sweet spot between what works and then questioning assumptions. So I was lucky enough with Frank Moore at UAA to just get a patent in May for that work at the university. This is my 4th patent. I get no money from them at all. They're a pain actually to file, but it's great to have Anchorage. Anchorage has some great inventors coming up with patents, and there's a lot of innovation going on in Anchorage. It's just we live so far apart and are isolated or in cabins, we don't communicate as well. So I'm going to talk about some examples at the Muni, which for some reason I could not say earlier to save my life. And you're like, oh, great, that guy's going to speak for half an hour? That's going to be fantastic. He can't even say where he works. So this is a letter that we send. Let's say you get a speeding ticket. After 2 or 3 years, you don't pay the speeding ticket. It goes from the police department to the Muni to the court system, and then back to the Muni, and then we send to third-party collections. So this is the letter that we used to send out, or this was the current letter that we sent out. It hadn't been changed in, I think, 15 years. And when you look at it, it's just kind of a wall of text. You get this in your mail. It might look like a Nigerian scam letter. It's hard to tell what it's about. It mentions a citation number in here, but it doesn't actually say what the the thing is for. So if you have to remember from 3 years ago why you have this strange number. So what we did is we had behavioral insights team come up. They started in the UK. They're called the Nudge Unit. And basically, they just look for ways to improve services by helping people do stuff they want to do. We're not trying to manipulate people. Like, I'm on a diet right now. I want to lose weight. I don't always do that. But if there's certain things that can help me achieve that goal, or if you automatically enroll in 401k when you start at a job, if that's already the selected option, then you have more people who want to do that in there and they can opt out. But if you make it a choice where they have to do it, they're like, oh, I'll do that tomorrow or 2 months or a year. So we had a workshop. We had a bunch of different people. We showed them different techniques. We put this on pink paper. We had them compete also and had judges. And we did a horrible job judging because we basically liked something from each of the 3 teams and combined it together, which is always like the lamest way for the teams to, oh, you all win. But anyway, the cool part, I knew it was working well because we had 3 people from Treasury who do this letter, and 2 of them were on one team and 1 was on the other, and they were talking trash between each other, and I'm like, okay, this workshop is working now. But basically, we put the information more front and center. We said what it's for. We put it on pink paper, which is the universal thing of you need to pay this or pay attention to it. On the envelope on the outside, we said in red letters, you really need to open this. And then we put payment due up in the upper right-hand corner and kind of explain that, oh, this is for tinted windows. If you look further down, there's information about what the actual thing that could have happened 5 or 6 years ago. And then we put information which we always had for a payment plan, but it was just really hard to find on the letter. And we made it more prominent. And as soon as we sent these letters out, people started calling the phone number. So we did a randomized control trial, which is basically you just take a random group of people that owe fines, you send them the regular letter, and you take, I think, 5,000 for one, 5,000 for the other. It turns out you get multiple fines when you get pulled over, so 10,000 letters for one, 10,000 for the other. And you want to do it randomized because you want the same number of Bon Jovi lovers in each group, or people who have dogs. You want to know that the letter is the only thing that's making the difference. And the challenge is something could come out, like a news story could come out and affect stuff, so it's hard to compare against history. You want to try to compare at the same time, which is great from a scientific standpoint, but it's hard to do in government because people get excited about the results. And you want to run this for like 3 months and measure all the results. But people were getting phone calls right away, and they're like, oh, this seems to be working. So the Treasury Department just changed all their letters to pink paper, and they made a bunch of other changes. They got really excited. We spent $18,000 on the first letter, and I think we got $66,000 in, and then they went and changed everything. They were amazing. They just took initiative, got excited, and I think they spent $56,000, but they got an additional $1 million of revenue for the next year. And some of that is not the letter. The problem when you tell these stories is the letter gets all the hype, but it's really the Treasury Department and their creativity. I mean, there are weird things where we get money from people's PFDs if they haven't paid, which isn't as sexy as changing a letter. But anyway, it got us a lot of good press. And I'm not sure about this headline about step away from the shiny object, but the thing I do want to stress with innovation, it doesn't have to be technology. My favorite stuff is just slight hacks. In fact, my tie was flopping around here before I got up here, so I asked someone if they have some Scotch tape, because this piece doesn't quite go down far enough, so it's just like, oh, I'll just put tape here and fix this problem. So it doesn't have to be big technology. Like one of the other favorite solutions I have is the mayor went to a gardening master gardener club, and he's like, hey, what do you guys want? Is there anything we can do to help? When he first started, Mayor Berkowitz. And they said, we need more compost. And so he brought it back to our team and had people take a look at it, and Travis Smith at the Muni came up with this idea to just have a bucket, and you take a bucket of food waste and you bring it into the landfill, and they give you a bucket of compost already, so it's just basically a swap. And it worked really well, and people were excited about it. Super simple solution, and some other cities are copying it now. And then I'm going to jump all over the place. There'll be a test at the end and scoring, and there's a scavenger hunt involved. So this is another nudge thing we're doing. So the innovation team, I'll explain this, and I'll do a deep dive in the I team. We're working with WIC, which is Food Resources and Nutritional Education for Pregnant Women, Infants, and Children, so children under the age of 5. And we worked with the state of Alaska, who's been great, and they gave us a list of people who were on Medicaid but not on WIC, and then we were able, and they're most likely eligible for WIC. So now we have a list of people that would probably qualify for this program, because 40% of people who are eligible aren't on the program. We're trying to figure out it's because they don't know about it or what the challenges are. But anyway, we sent out this postcard, and we sent out the regular postcard, and we did kind of behavioral insights, and we started to get a better response of people coming in from the postcards. The other thing is you learn stuff as you do these quick experiments. A lot of people had already been in WIC and then become unenrolled and then re-enrolled. So we're like, oh, why are people, that was another question to study. All right, so now everything in the modern age has to be an iPod or whatever. So we're an I team, we're one of 7. In this latest cohort, there's been 3 cohorts. We're really grateful that Bloomberg Philanthropies had sponsored us. Since Mayor Berkowitz took office, we have gotten into 5 Bloomberg government innovation programs. We have more than any other city in the United States, and that's been a main goal of mine, is to leverage these networking resources and money and apply and drag the mayor around to a lot of stuff, and he's been great in supporting that. So we have Anchorage, Austin, Durham, Baltimore, Detroit, Toronto, and Beersheba in our current cohort. But there's a bunch of other cities, Louisville, some of the early cities have already gone through the 3-year kind of startup, but have their own innovation teams, and the goal is to have an innovation team after the grant runs out, which is mid-2020, not to have one just for the sake of having one, but to show that there's value in actually saving money and generating revenue. All right, so this is in the upper right-hand corner, there's Patrick, myself, Susie Marshall, who started with us and is now our Chief Information Officer. She's the IT director. And now we have Ben Matheson, who's our data analyst. And then on the far right here is Emily Bokar, our innovation strategist, and she joined us in October. And this was something we were really lucky. Anchorage got a Bloomberg Philanthropies Public Arts Grant for $1 million to take something next to the museum. It's called the Seed Lab, and the idea is to have artists and innovators and scientists generate art related to the impacts of climate change and economic development, and generate stuff over a couple of years there. And Mike Bloomberg came and presented the award, and it was great. We got to sit down and talk to him for about 30 minutes in the museum. He was super nice. It was really intimidating preparing for the thing. And I totally blew it because his first question was, what can I do to help you guys? And I should have said $1 billion would be nice. Because he has $41 billion, but it was really fun. So what we do is we're kind of data-driven. So we have a team of 4.5, and we do human-centered design and then quantitative data. And then we want to try to do quick, small experiments. We want to fail fast, which is like a very lean startup kind of thing, but do something, if it's not better than status quo, just shut it down. We don't want like huge mega projects. We want to, and I have great support from the mayor's staff to be able to do something where I get super excited, tell everyone it's going to change the world, and it does not. So, and then we're like, oh yeah, that didn't quite work out the way we thought. So research-based solutions, and we don't do implementation, so we work with partners, and the goal is by the end of our process, they'll have something they're excited about, and we've proved that it'll work, and they'll implement it after us. And I think the goal there is so that we don't just take $1.5 million and buy a bunch of snowplows. The goal is to try to leverage that money. We also have to bring in $500,000 of additional match, which we just did. I had to do it by February 1st and just got there. So this is what our office looks like, orange and Post-its and whiteboards. So one key thing is to talk to users. Everyone's really busy delivering their services. Most people, this is my first job in government, and I love it. Most people I meet who work in government are fantastic, generous people, and they got into the job because they want to help people. But oftentimes, you get removed from the people you're actually helping, and you're in these processes, and there's a lot of bureaucracy, which I didn't quite understand. My background was, I was at Code for Anchorage, we'd buy some pizza and some beer and take a data set and make something in 2 hours. And we didn't ask permission for anything, and we didn't always make something correctly, but it was a much faster time frame. The great thing about government is you have to serve everyone. That's also a challenge, because you have to serve everyone, so you have to make sure it works. So this is the WIC office over at Anchorage Health Department. Here's Food Bank of Alaska. Here is a food pantry we've been working with in Spenard. And here's a simple experiment. We have a $15 gift card if you'll sit down for 15 minutes to interview us. So we interviewed about 20 people and took all that information, and we're not actually looking for the average, we're looking for outliers. We're looking for things that we go in with assumptions of what we think the problem is, but we really want to hear from the users what their challenges are, what their pain points are. And so we gave them some cards so they could pick questions. We did get some people who were like, I just want this $15, so I'm going to pick the easiest questions. But most people opened up and told us about really interesting stuff. We also talked to the people that work in the food pantry. This is Ryan. We discovered that Spam is hugely popular because it's a protein that's shelf-stable, and you don't need a can opener to open it. And then cake mixes. He tries to bring in birthday cake mixes because sometimes someone who's going to the food pantry, it's the child's birthday, and being able to make that cake for them for their birthday is kind of like a nice special thing. And then, yeah, I'm all over the map here. Data-driven. So we looked at a lot of census data, and there's a great amount of census data. The problem with the Anchorage is we have a smaller population, so there's a margin of error for a lot of the census data. But basically, some of the stuff we found interesting, when we looked in Muldoon, which is the middle one there, every single person who's on SNAP, which is what food stamps are called now, had at least one person working in the family, and 2/3 of them had 2 people working in the family. So one challenge there is people are working, but the wages they're getting not only aren't enough for them to be food secure, I mean, they qualify for food benefits just with the wages they're getting. So we compared those versus Anchorage. We looked at cost of living. Our first tact was to try to increase economic opportunity. So basically what we're trying to do is some people have, if you look here, this is a median household and median household income. So the far one on the left is Anchorage, and the average person makes $6,739. Or household of 2 people, 2 parents and 2 kids makes this. And they're above these different colored things, and the colored things are what we're calling things that you have to get each month. So people are making choices. If you're making less than that, then you're making more choices between, do I pay for healthcare? Do I pay for childcare? And so we ended up focusing on food security. We just want to help move that line up a little so people don't have to choose between 3 things, but maybe they're choosing between 2 things or 1 thing, or ultimately not choosing between anything. This is an interesting data set that is based on tax data, and it's where employees work and where they live. And we included the Valley in this, and I'll include links for Doug. But basically, if you highlight a census tract, it'll show you where people commute to work in that census tract. So the yellow track is where that's over kind of by Mountain View, and then all the different regions are where people are commuting to. Oh wait, it's the opposite, sorry. This is Mountain View, and a lot of people are going to work at the airport. The airport has a ton of jobs in that lower left-hand corner. And then we did it at the census block level, which was a little too granular, because you'll have 1 or 2 people in there. But I think this data set could be interesting if you're trying to find corridors of where people travel and if you can improve transit through there. This is our the Muni Open Data Portal. We just added additional property data, camera property appraisal data. And when I first started, we put that out, and I put it out too quick. I put out everything that you could buy on a CD. You could buy a CD from the Muni. It costs like $300. That was actually how much it cost us to generate it for you, but we were doing it off a mainframe. And I put out the exact same data, and then property appraisal is like, wait, what is all this data out here? I'm like, this is the same data that you can get on a CD. So I think there's a difference between open data and easily accessible data. And people, even when you show them that this is what you're gonna do, they're not gonna really look at it until it's live. I mean, they'll look at it, but then when people notice stuff. So I had to pull it back, and that was a good lesson for me of going faster than my partner. But since then, I've worked with property appraisal. They've been great, and we've improved the data set a lot. And now we have 3 different years out there. And they discovered that when people have a lot of questions about property, they can just send them to the data set. And if someone wants to do deep research, they can go check it out there. They can download all the property appraisal data just in their pajamas at 11 p.m. at night. And it's kind of a gradual evolution as you do this, getting people comfortable with the data, but then it actually saves time for the property appraisal staff now. This was a map I made at Code for Anchorage that just shows properties by the decade they were built. And you can just see how different neighborhoods have different years. But the other thing, putting data out and visualizations out, I think Doug mentioned it really well in terms of crowdsourcing. In terms of Tom Sawyer, I can paint a fence white, but if I tell people how cool it is, I can get them to paint the fence for me. And so someone from the historical properties saw this, and they're like, hey, could you make a map that just showed everything over 50 years old? And I'm like, oh yeah, that would take like 15 minutes. But you get different people coming up with different uses for the data. There's a machine learning class this semester at UAA, and they're using the property appraisal data to see how long people have owned property based on the deed date, and they're doing some Monte Carlo methods. I used to TA at UAA, but I did not talk to this class at all, and that's when you're really excited, is when people are doing stuff that you haven't cheerleaded for. They're using the data and using it in a different way, and I'm really excited to see what they come up with. Also, it's great for students. I've TA'd classes. When you're a student, you want to do the project you want to do, but often the data isn't there. So if you can show people data that's already kind of curated in a good form, and everything on our open data portal has an API, so you can immediately like start querying it and hitting it. And my wife always teases me, but I put dog name data up on our portal, and I've updated it 4 times. Last time I was here, I gave a talk on dogs, hip hop, and data, and queried the room about what they thought the most popular dog names were. Now we have like 4 different, we don't have a regular time that we get it, but we have 4 different sets. So now I can show the most popular names as they rank over the different times. So Bella is clearly way out in front. What's a new one? Luna down at 13 jumped into the top 10 in 8th place. But now you can, as you collect more data, you can kind of see how it changes over time. All right, let's make sure I'm not out of control here. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into our work really quickly. I have a ton of slides. I'm going to wrap it up in a few minutes and then ask for questions, but because I could talk forever, which is not great for you guys. So one thing we noticed is SNAP and WIC. If everyone who is eligible, we're not looking to have other people who aren't eligible. We're just looking for current eligible people, the same way that everyone who's eligible for a PFD it should probably file for a PFD. I mean, technically it makes ours go down like 27 cents when other people apply, but we're just looking for full participation. And the great thing is this is federal money that comes in through the state of Alaska into these individual zip codes. And there's a standard multiplier of 1.7, so for every dollar that comes in, we're getting $1.7 of economic opportunity. So we're basically leaving $45 million of federal money on the table. And when I work with Bloomberg and other things, I try to explain like, oh, we have Alaska, we're very independent, we have different ideas, but like federal money, yeah, we want federal money. State money, all that gets confusing because we don't have income taxes or taxes. So the other thing I was showing about spam, I'm going to speed through these. One thing we discovered was there's stuff at the food pantry, but if you don't have a can opener, or if you don't have certain kitchen equipment, like an Instapot or something, it's going to be much harder to cook some of these foods. So people are taking food based on what utility they have. So this is kind of the research we do. We go work with a partner, we try to learn as much from them, tell them the stuff they already know, and they're like, well, you guys were gone for 2 months, like we told you that in the beginning. But we have to like really kind of immerse ourselves and look for root causes. So our goal, there'll be iterations here. The goal was reduce hunger and food hardship among food insecure Anchorage residents. And this is basically 73% of SNAP users are in families with children. There's a lot of children that this is impacting, 1 in 6 children. A lot of people, elderly or disabilities. The other thing is 42% are in working families. So people are working. There's goals to have means testing for working, but a lot of people are working and doing the things that we would want in a program. It's just not making ends meet. So this is too much text, but a couple things that we learned was stigma. When we first came in, we thought that people were afraid to use stuff because of how they'd be judged by that people were judging them and they didn't want to use services. Then we discovered it was more an internal thing where someone who didn't want to go to a food pantry for the first time, but when they viewed it as like, I need to help my family, and they went the first time and saw other people, then they were able to go the second time, but that first time was a very big challenge, or using some of these programs. And when we talked to the food pantry, there was an accountant who'd been laid off from an oil company who was coming there and felt like really, there was a huge stigma element we were trying to figure out how to deal with. The other thing is, like most government services, the process is complicated. There's a lot of forms. It's hard to know where you are. If it was Candyland, you just really don't know where you are in the process. And then the staff is doing a great job, but they could have modern tools that could help scale their performance. And then a lot of people also have non-food challenges, like transportation, multiple jobs, and the timing of when things are open. All right, so our goals are just to make things better. I'm going to speed through this here. We ended up working on looking at SNAP, which is food stamps, WIC, Food Bank of Alaska, and food pantries, because they already have a distribution system and there's federal money, and 97% of SNAP dollars go to buying food. Like, it's a really efficient way to help people with food insecurity. There's very low overhead on administration. So we're not gonna find, and we're leaving $45 million on the table, we're not gonna find a grant that, if we can get 10% of that, we're not gonna find a $4 million a year grant from a foundation that's gonna go on endlessly. But this is money that could be flowing into Anchorage if we make the system work better. So then we came up with a bunch of prototypes. You give them weird names, and right now we're in this phase now where we're making the prototypes with our partners. And this is the part I like the most. I like making things, experiments. We were doing a bunch of research, which I also like, but I want less talk, more rock, and now that's kind of where we're at. So some of them are super simple, like, could we just have an orientation? The food pantry is not open on Monday, but could we have it open where it's first-time users, they come in, if they're kind of introverts or shy, the staff could just show them the ropes and have it be in a much less intimidating thing. They would also be with other people who are first-time users, so there'd be a sense of community. Once people see other people that, often people aren't using it for a long time, they're just in a rough patch. So this is kind of the way we list stuff. Here's a quote: "The first time I felt I ain't on top of it. You know, a man's supposed to be self-supporting. You ain't self-supporting when you're in a food line. When you first go, you get a how are people looking at me? I shouldn't be here and I should be working." So we have qualitative quotes that we use to support the work when we work with Bloomberg. And then we have metrics that we're looking to measure. So I'll just speed through these. Find Your People is just basically using marketing to see, can we run Facebook ads? Can we use Google ads? Can we put stuff on buses? Can we test channels? This is all kind of customer acquisition. It's what MTA and GCI and other people use to measure what's an effective way to get new customers. And then deduction booster is when people are doing taxes now, and people often don't know about all the deductions that are available or assets. When you go to a great caseworker, they'll tell you about that stuff. But there's people that are getting $18 and they could be getting $140. And again, I'm not trying to have people be on all these programs, but if they're eligible, I'm just trying to have them get I'm just trying to get those federal dollars. Because it stimulates the economy. So one thing is algorithmically, we haven't gotten access from the state yet, but we'd like to run a query that showed potential people that might not be getting the full deduction, and then have Food Bank of Alaska just call them. So not really rocket science here, just basic stuff. And this is based on some stuff in California where people have had minor drug convictions that are no longer illegal, and now they're trying to figure out ways to expunge it. And the expungement process is you have to go to the county in which it occurred, go to that courthouse. If you live in LA and this occurred in San Francisco, that's kind of a pain in the butt. And Code for America has experimented with doing it, and they're like, hey, we could just write a SQL query to do this, to work with lawyers, make sure everything's correct. Online forms is not really revolutionary, but the other thing is when you make prototypes and show stuff to people, you can tell people what you're gonna do, but if you can quickly make it and show it to them, it makes a big difference when you ask permission. And a lot of my job as the director is asking for permission. And now that I've been in government for 2.5 years, I'm like, oh, I don't know if we can do that. I was brought in to disrupt government, and now I'm the person that I'm supposed to disrupt. I'm like, oh, whoa. But here is the form on the left. It hasn't been changed in, I think, 8 years. And then what we've done is we've talked to staff to see how they enter it into the computer. So we move the forms to where they have to type it in. So they're in the order that they type it into their system. And we've just kind of made it more legible and readable. And this is a PDF. And it's a fillable PDF now. So you can download this, you can fill it in and type it. Right now, people are spending like 20 minutes filling it out in the lobby. They have their kids with them often. So this is just an easier way to fill it out. Now, we've asked the state just this morning before I came here, gave us approval to put this form, the new form out for people to use on the Anchorage Muni site, and they're interested in using it statewide. They want to have an editable one so people can put their own logos. We also are asking them if people can email in the filled PDF, because then the staff could just type it in. And that's when you start running into challenges, which are valid challenges, where you need to talk about private information and security. So we're starting to figure that out. But at the same time, we're making stuff so that we know we can't do this right now. This uses Google Forms on a mobile phone. And then it goes to Zapier, which is something that connects services, and then it goes to PDF Filler and creates a fillable PDF, and then it emails it to the staff. So we know this, we can't use the things that we're using for it, but it gives us a tangible way to show it to people, because if we explain it, it's kind of like, well, here's 27 things that you can't do for that. But if we show the power of it, we're hoping it will let us work with the state in a way to come up with a solution. Like, we might have to build it in totally different software, but as a proof of concept, it works pretty well. Some things are super simple. Food Bank of Alaska was helping people. We just got them an office at Anchorage Health Department. That was super easy, quick win. Wilma is a way to help people screen when they're, so right now, someone from Food Bank calls a bunch of people, and what this does is just sends text messages. So it asks a lot of the questions, and we're using something texted on in. We can make something really quick. So it's basically, hi, did you get your benefits, yes or no? And just goes through this choose your own adventure thing. Free ride is just, people are eligible for some free rides. Can we put Lyft and Uber in there? And then order online. I've used Instacart now 7 times doing research to get groceries delivered to my house. I'm just trying to figure out how that would work. But our next steps are just create these prototypes. We started with 14, only like 3 or 4 in the cage match will survive and move forward. And that's what we're doing. And that's it. Do you have any questions? Sorry, that was a lot.
Well, a lot of content. I haven't really, a couple of years ago, we saw the open data platform, and so it's really moved on to several different grants that Brendan and his team have been able to get, and now into the food security realm. So, and I guess all your grants, Brendan, are there for food security, and there are other topics, or is your primary focus right now food security this year?
We're wrapping up food security, but we're interested in energy efficiency as a next potential project. So I'm excited to see MTA and other people, and I'd love to figure out ways to share data between there so that buildings can know how much energy they're using. Because we kind of have a disconnect. Accounting gets the electricity bill, the departments don't get it, or they get one block thing, so it's really hard for, and we actually lease Capitol or City Hall, so we don't, turning off lights, you don't see a direct impact, so we're interested in ways to do that. I took a lot of time, and I just threw a bunch of text at you. Are there any questions? Yeah.
So you have way more sticky notes on your wall than you have possibly resources. How do you filter down what you're going to work on?
That is a great question. Emily Bokar, who just started with us, she's our innovation strategist, and she is helping figure out a scoping and kind of a rubric, because that is a bad habit I have of saying yes to everything and being excited about everything. I mean, there's so much amazing stuff going on. So we're trying to figure out how to see what would have impact, and we're also trying to make a case for ourselves. So some of the stuff that has more financial impact would be useful at this point. But other stuff, we've done 311. We had the phone number, but it didn't go anywhere, and now that's online. And we also did a behavioral insights thing that the results should be at the end of this month, which is renewing your dog license. We try in different emails. And one challenge I would say there is that people get excited. All these RCTs, when we did the pink letters, the next month after people got excited, they sent the pink letters to the control group. So we kind of messed up the experiment. And then with the postcard thing, we got a new batch of stuff, and someone sent them to the people we'd already sent them to. So with God as my witness, I'm going to run a perfect RCT at some time. But it really doesn't matter, because you get people excited, and if you start saving money or getting better service, then that's really the goal. It's nice to have something that you can show the results so that you can talk to funders and say, for every X dollars you give us, we will impact this many people, or for other cities to borrow. The other thing is in terms of your scoping, I was at Syracuse, did something where they hand wrote notes on property taxes on the envelopes to say, hey, you owe back property tax. And they saw a big impact. And so we started to scope that. I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great. And Anchorage actually does a really good job of collecting. It turns out if you put a lien on someone's property, it really helps them pay. So the data I found was $8 million. We're like, $8 million in back taxes owed. But I had just found it at the beginning of when they'd figured it out. In a year and a half, that drops down to like $50,000 and like 50 people. So as much as I want to do some crazy experiment, there's no need to. So you want to try to scope and find that stuff out. The other thing is just technology isn't an end-all, but the technologies we have now, we do a lot of stuff where you can send text messages or make phone calls. We have something testing for how many beds are available at a shelter. At Covenant House, it just calls at 11:59 p.m., and someone picks up the phone. It's a robot that talks to them and says how many beds are full. And they punch it in on a keypad, and the goal is that they don't have to be near a computer, and then we just get real-time information about that. So trying to make things that are super simple for people to use, and you can prototype stuff really cheap. A text message is 3/4 of a cent. So that's a great question. I'll just show you quick slides. This is a UPIC for a way to check your food balance. We just had someone locally change that. this was how you checked buses. There's a text version, we just grabbed that. And now you can text and find out when the bus is going to arrive. And we use IBM Watson, so you can tell it a knock-knock joke there in the middle. And knock-knock jokes are just an algorithm. And whatever you say, it says, oh, that's really funny. And then we have stuff for checking your court hearing. And during an election, you can get an update every time the election results are texted. So making quick stuff.
You have this whole deck. So we have our website that I'll tell you a little bit more about later, but the forum website is set up, and I've set it up for links and obviously all the presentation documents. So I've got this on my machine. So I appreciate this is a load of information, more than I had expected. I appreciate it, Brendan.
Yeah, sorry, I need to.
Well, it's terrific, and a lot of different ideas are going on. It's great to see, and it's a little bit more unique than what we have typically at one of our forums. So, can I? All right, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. And I'd love to work with other agencies or whatever. Thank you so much.
This is that for you. Okay, Mike.
Okay, good morning. I'm Mike Hendricks. I am as you can see here, a geospatial analyst at DGGS up in Fairbanks, and I was asked to come talk here today about the portal work that we've been working. I've really started out at kind of the bottom end, the technology side of this. Kenny Wood, who was there, who worked a fair amount with the Geospatial Council and GeoPortal and on elevation work, kind of was running a lot with all of this. But now he has left actually about now 2 months ago to another job at Amsterdam. So he's no longer here in Alaska. And I have gotten more involved in some of the GeoPortal issues kind of at the upper level and the data, as opposed to just kind of getting that started. So I was asked to kind of come in and talk about how the work we've been doing and how it fits into the kind of the bigger scheme of things, or how we see it. So a little background about myself. I've been here about 5 years, excuse me. So I've been here about 5 years in Alaska. I was currently, or before that, in New York. I was in the Army. I retired from the Army. I was teaching at the Military Academy, GIS and cartography and remote sensing and things like that. And came out to Alaska to say, well, let me go see something different, stay away from humidity and traffic. And that worked out quite well up in Fairbanks. And to kind of actually just work as an analyst and working with data, working with maps, working with all that. I was heavily involved over the last few years with the elevation portal that we run up in Fairbanks, and working with all the imagery services and getting all that set up. And then over the last few years, again, this kind of portal work at the enterprise portal kind of stuff. Also, by the way, I am an adjunct faculty with UAA in the geomatics program, where I teach the spatial data structures class and now the intermediate GIS class. So I do that remotely from back in Fairbanks every year. In fact, after this afternoon, I'm going out there to actually look at the students for once a semester. Let's see, I don't know how many will show up, though, so we'll see if it's worthwhile. And I know a lot of you are involved. We already talked about open data portals and the portals here, kind of in the general area of the southern part of Alaska. But this is kind of the 4 bullets we've come up, and this was some slides made for the Geospatial Council. Steve Masterman, our director of DGGS, is heavily involved in the Geospatial Council now, and so now and then I get involved with helping him more and more as Kenny has gone. And as we've kind of been discussing in the first couple of discussions, shared discovery and access is the key to all of this, and services is kind of what drives a lot of that. And I'll have some slides and some thoughts. So most of all the things you see here, the people in the room are fully aware of. So this was a graphic made for the Geospatial Council talk, and it kind of upper level brings parts of what we all working on here. And things that were just discussed, you know, it's not just data that we're trying to get into people's hands, it's the maps and the apps. And those three, you can look at a good differentiation of how you provide some of that stuff, and that's going to percolate through a lot of the discussions of how we got some things set up and what we think we might integrate others in. And this idea of the net, you know, really what this, I haven't been to any of these before because I'm way up there in Fairbanks, but, you know, what you guys are really trying to do is create, you know, technologically, but even organizationally, sharing data between organizations, and that someone said at the beginning, you know, make data once, store it once, and then provide other people that data. It's easy standing up here and saying that because, you know, a simple example is just roads. You know, DOT has roads and there's services, you can get that, but there's often like, well, but I need it just a little different. So it's very hard sometimes to truly take it as is. And if they make it, if you make a data set that is good for everyone, well, invariably then it's so huge and has so many weird attributes, it's not good for anyone. So that, how do you find that middle ground is something we have to wrestle with over the next few years. And we've already been doing it for a long time. And I've thought about that. With our elevation data, it's the same thing. We have elevation data in our portal. You can download it, but then someone will say, well, I just want a little piece of this, and I want you to change it to be in feet instead of meters. Well, okay, I could make that, so now it's available. Now I have twice as many data sets available. What's the best sweet spot there? And that's part of why we have meetings like this. So this process right here, this portals, is really how do we set this up and what are we doing, what have we done at DGGS, and how does that fit into what Aaron up at DNR has been working on, and all the organizations have your various portals and open data sites and all that. So while I got more involved in this process over the last few years, the term portal or portals, and you start to go, well, what do you mean? And you talk to different people, and you invariably are talking about different things, because that word in particular is used a zillion times in all kinds of different ways. And so I put together this slide trying to kind of get a handle on making sure we're talking about the same thing here today and then for other things. What I kind of liked was pretty funny. I went and found, well, what does portal mean? So I always been explaining, oh, it's a gate, you know, a door, a gateway to some information. But I thought it was rather interesting, this last piece, especially a large and imposing one. So that's probably very true, you know, when people say it. And in building these things, if you want to make them very useful, because at some level, a portal is nothing more than a web page with links to other stuff. So it could be really simple. But that's not overly helpful. So how do you get to the point where it might be imposing to build, but it actually gets you into something useful instead of just some crummy, you know, dry cabin with one room in it. So really what we're talking about is the second part, you know, a web page or website that gives you access or links to other sites. So then you got your problem of your ESRI-isms. There's all kinds of different terminology. And this is how kind of I see the world right now in this graphic, how that all fits into there. When we say portal, in a while back, people think of a piece of software that you install called Portal. And that is technically still called Portal. It's a piece of software in what is now referred to as ArcGIS Enterprise that has, you install Portal, you can install one or many servers, and you can install data store database. Which is different than your enterprise database that you may want to access through your server, through your portal. So this ArcGIS Enterprise then is also referred to often as a portal. So that's a bit tricky because you get very confused when someone says, well, what are you actually talking about? And it's this piece that a number of your organizations I know have set up in your shops as well. But this is what particularly Kenny installed, and I've been putting data in, and I'll talk a lot more about later. This is, in essence, a portal that is just like ArcGIS Online, which is a portal, but it's the ESRI version on the cloud. So there's where the confusion also lies. How do you work on that? And how do you, how do the two relate to each other? And we'll talk more about this is collaborations. And we talk about collaboration in general here at the meeting, but there is a specific technological collaboration we can set up between these portals. You know, I've been referring to both of these a lot in our office as portal. You have a portals. Well, whether you're going to put it on our enterprise portal or put it on our ArcGIS Online portal, in some regards, it's the same thing. What you like to do is not have to put it into both of them, and that's where the collaboration can help. And actually, Aaron and I successfully, after talking about it as vaporware for a year or so, successfully created a collaboration between our DGGS Enterprise portal and the DNR ArcGIS Online site. So then you have the ArcGIS Online, which has now open data application, which can reference or link, or there's all kinds of, what does it do? It doesn't actually copy the data up there, but it provides the public access to your content in ArcGIS Online in kind of a more public, easy way to look at it. But in essence, that's also a portal. So there's, again, part of kind of the confusion. These are all types of portals, and open data, you can take an open data site and reference it in another open data site. So that's, in essence, what Aaron has started to do at DNR's open data site, is pulling in open data from a lot of your organizations. So this kind of framework is very important, and once I kind of started to get a handle on how that works, kind of helps the process quite a bit. Now, off to the side of all of this is just other portals in general. Our elevation data portal at DGGS is not built as an ArcGIS Online site. It is it's an independent operation, but that data as a minimum can be, the site can be linked to our open data location, and also the services that run into our elevation app can be brought into ArcGIS Online or into our portal, and then come through this stack out to the public. And that's what I've started to do. And I'll show you a little bit more details of that in just a moment. I think what's also important, again, I think a fair amount of you already kind of understand this issue, is you have these various GIS servers. Our ARC server, image server. These can all be separate, or they all can be in one box. What's very interesting, we have an open ticket with ESRI right now. We got a strange problem where we're upgrading, or no, we're making a new ARC server for the Department of Forestry, and we can't get it to do anything except be an image server. It won't be a regular old ARC server, which is causing all kinds of problems. But so you basically produce these kinds of servers, and up until a few years ago, the server was the focal point of our efforts and thoughts and thinking. You thought of the server, the services, you just kind of went to the REST endpoint. Average user was like, oh my God, look at all that text. There's all sorts of weird stuff on that page. But that was the focus, and now we're kind of starting to think more up in here and get people access to a page that looks a little nicer without us having to make it. Okay, any questions on that? These next couple I'll go through kind of fast. I've used these for various talks I give at work or even for some of the classes. Again, it's kind of terminology and making sure we understand this. So some of the objects in the ESRI universe of things, we have this portal, and this could be, like I said, this enterprise or this ArcGIS Online. It's all the same thing. And a lot of you have used all this stuff before, but sometimes making sure we're talking about the same thing. These items or layers, which are inside the portal, are just pointing back to the portal, and if you upload it into ArcGIS Online, it's in their data store, or it's going back through Arc Server into your enterprise database, or to some file database or something like that. So it's all going through the stack, but this becomes the important piece that you're sharing and kind of thinking through and managing. It kind of flips from what I was spending most of my time thinking about exactly what was on this Arc Server. So less I focus here and more I've been focusing here. Now, mind you, I only have the same amount of time each day, so this I'm not doing very well anymore, so this I'm doing more of. So that's the problem. So then the other thing too that kind of good to get a handle on is, in essence, each of these are no different than a layer file in ArcMap or a LR layer X file in Arc Pro. And so in essence, that's the same type of thing. And you have map servers, feature servers, image servers, and tile layers, and a whole bunch more of other kinds. I've been spending huge amounts of time with imagery layers because of all the elevation data and all that in our image server. We spend actually way more time making services for imagery layers than we do feature layers. So then that goes into a web map, and that is like a map document or a map project inside of an Arc Pro, and you can open multiple ones as we go. How many people are using Arc Pro mostly? Do we have any mostly Arc Proers in here? Well, it is a bit of an older crowd compared to our young analysts. So, and I can say that because, as you notice, I am getting there, up there. And I'm trying real hard to use it more and more, and I kind of go roller coaster, fits and starts on the matter. But we've actually had at DGGS a major problem getting a handle on terminology on web map and web app. And again, this is kind of the ESRI terminology, but most people think of this as just one thing. They say web map and web app, and they kind of flip them around any way they want, which is really no big deal, except sometimes in your organization you get kind of confused on the matter as what are you actually talking about. When we make applications outside of the ESRI kind of universe, we're making objects that are, they don't think of these as two separate pieces. Now the fact is it's actually very powerful as it's two separate pieces, because then, as I'll show you in this next slide, we can access this spider work of things many different ways. So getting a handle on how people are using our pieces in our portal is important. Like I had said, in the olden days, we only went from the far left, from the database to the GIS user. So then we said, oh, it's super cool, we can make this Arc server, we could only take a month or two to try to install it and get it to work, and a couple more months to put the services on it, and you can access that service from GIS if you knew where it was. Or you can look at a web browser and make something special and look directly at that server from the REST endpoint. So now, and that's still the case. If you give people access, they can still access the data. That same data can be viewed from either of those, and then out through Portal, it pops out as a layer. Now, the thing is, they're really kind of separate things. Each one, this is just a pointer back to that Arc server, just like a layer file if you use those things. So that the GIS users, and this is the piece we're trying to push a lot internally, where someone's connected to the portal, they just type in what they're looking for, and up it pops. The problem is you type in something, you get 50,000 returns, and which one is the one to use? That's, I think, our challenge in the future, is getting a handle on that. Now, we're getting where more and more stuff is on these servers, and more items are available, and now it's like we're back where we started. We got so much stuff on there that sometimes it's not terribly useful. So that layer then, just because it's like basically using ArcGIS, can be multiple web apps, and a user then, instead of just opening up the one layer, maybe opens up the web map that someone's already put together with the things that that analyst needs. We don't think of that as much, that we get some of our employees or people to open that web map already pre-made for them, if they're not an expert user. But that's what, interesting little piece that people get confused a lot is the web map is what a mobile app uses. Because the app is an app, it's not a web app. We get a lot of our people confused because they're looking for the web app with their mobile app. And they're like, what the heck? And I've been in a quandary, should I call everything that's a web map, and everything that is a web app at the end of it, so you know what the heck you're looking at when you get the thing returned. I'm not sure what other people have done, and I've gone back and forth, and how's the best way to handle that? So And I know we at DGGS have spent, 5 years ago, our focus was the public and access through web apps data. It didn't give a lot of thought to how would the users internal to the building, just 4 offices down, access that same data internally. So that's one of the big pushes we're working on, is focus on the data and publish data, and then the web app is something made not necessarily for as long-term as that data layer we publish. We're in a paralysis of publishing. It's mostly good because we publish data that is a publication that, some geologic data set that's there forever, and then we'll make a web app of something like that. And we've gotten into a bit of a problem where we focused a lot on that web app and thinking that's not going to change, and that is what we published. And then like, okay, 10 years from now, are we going to ever access that same web app? Chances are no, but we do want to always have access to that data. So we're actually putting a lot of focus on the data aspect. That's what we publish. And I know we have a much heavier kind of view of publishing, because DGGS is kind of like an academic institution, kind of like a research place, kind of like a regular organization. So finding the right way of publication and having that scientifically correct, authoritative data available. And oh, by the way, if you can't access it directly, here's a web app for you to use it. So kind of disconnect that piece, and that's what I've been using this. So this whole portal piece here, one last part, and actually I used this exact slide in my class just the other day to talk about metadata. We have a whole lesson on metadata, that's nice. The thing about that, and metadata can be as simple as, the SRI tells you must put the keyword in there and a summary and a description. I'll be honest, I am crappy at that. I'll just put, Alaska in there and be done with it. We do have a person, though, when we actually publish data. Their purpose in life in our very small organization is the metadata for all our publications. So if something's published, we have full-on FGDC metadata. That's very good. But at least that minimal data and that keyword piece, I think, is something we have to get a handle on at the state level to say, well, what are the keywords that will drive some of this technology? And a lot of us are doing it, and probably internally your organizations may or may not have kind of good standards on the matter. I know if something's not published for us, we are the Wild West, but if it's published, there's an exact way we do it. And those keywords drive a lot of that flow through this stack that I've been talking about. But that metadata also is a bit tricky. You make it in the data, or you make it as a separate object that sits unto itself that you download separately. A lot of our stuff is still like that, where you can download the metadata and you can download the data, but they're not embedded if it's an ESRI kind of feature class or as the together. So we're working on being better and better at that. But once that metadata is in there, it flows up through the stack. The reality is, I would argue, ESRI has not spent quite enough time to make sure that is a nice seamless flow. We have a lot of problems where if we change metadata back here and that data doesn't move up if it's a reference data seamlessly through all the pieces. So when you have to republish services to get metadata to show up. But that's something that'll get solved eventually. So this is all really the metadata of the same thing. Just happens to be this database that's going through a service that someone's looking at it through this layer. But right now, if you change this metadata here manually, because someone says, oh, you misspelled Alaska, I always spell Arctic wrong, almost every single time. And then you go, oh, well, if you change it here, it didn't change back in the data, and now you've really boogered up the whole process. And so really you want to change it back here and make sure it flows through this. I don't know if people have dealt with this problem, but we've had all sorts of trickiness with getting this metadata to be the same throughout the process. And then, just like anything, because this is something different that has multiple layers, there's a whole separate thought of metadata at this layer that most people completely forget about, because it's metadata of these multiple layers. So this might not be a lot of information, because it's not the data per se, it's the web map. And the same thing with the web app. How to get a handle on that. I know a lot of times what we do in the similar process DGGS is, even if it's not within this ESRI stack, is this metadata has all the metadata from everything that app has. And that's good, but not, it's somewhat, it's certainly an overkill. Okay, so this right now is kind of how I see is the kind of possible network of how our enterprise portal that we've set up here or there, up there at DGGS, links in with a lot of the work you guys have been doing at the state level of geoportals. So right here, this is what I have been referring to as portal, or I've been calling it our office portal to the people inside our office. This is what that stack of portal, data store, and Arc server that you install on your own machines, and I know a number of your other organizations you've done that as well. But Kenny has set up in our DGGS building a DGGS office enterprise portal, I'll call it. We have a DNR portal and a state portal. So those are all running. Theoretically, there can be collaborations between them. And we're in production of putting in a Division of Forestry portal. And I know a number of other state agencies have portals that they have, but we are not doing any collaboration yet because my world is down here, and quite honestly, I have 3 times as much stuff to do just doing this job. So I haven't been spending until just recently thinking about this kind of big picture of things. So we have these things set up, and that's Kenny was a year ago thinking with many, maybe some of you here, I'm not sure all the people he talked to, is, well, maybe this becomes the center cog of everything at the state government level, and we push everything through those portals. And that could be done. A lot of other agencies build these enterprise portals completely behind firewalls, and this is solely for internal sharing. Ours are set up right now that you can access publicly, and it's all just password driven, that some things are public and some things are for just sharing. And the reality is we're not doing a ton of sharing with it right now, but we could. Now, I'll talk about this field portal thing a bit later as a shameless plug for my talk for the brave ones of you who want to be here Friday at 4:30, which is the very last talk of the conference. So for many, many years, we have had our ArcGIS Online portal, which if you've ever looked at the 2 different pages, they're exactly the same. There's really no difference between being on an enterprise portal or a ArcGIS Online portal. It just happens to be their version of the software running on the cloud. Which is a bit odd, not everybody realizes is everyone in DNR is all using one site. So Aaron over here is the main organizer and wrangler of our site, but oddly enough, well, not oddly because we have multiple divisions, we have multiple administrators. So I can technically change all the stuff she just did yesterday. And like Versus, she can do the same to me. So there was one email particularly. And because actually you can license through your ArcGIS Online, your Arc Pro. You can actually license through your enterprise portal Arc Pro as well if you want to go down that line. We started to experiment with that. That's right when Kenny left, and then we never actually did anything with it. So we have all of us in DNR are in one site, and we have that set up. We at DGGS did not put hardly anything on our ArcGIS Online site. We were playing very independently and then very strongly heading down this path. So I've started to put a whole bunch of stuff on our portal, and it was separate from all the other DNR stuff over in the ArcGIS Online piece. But unless you're colorblind, you should see that this green line here, this is where we've successfully set up a collaboration. It's really not production level yet, but this is where we envision more and more of these official collaborations, and there's a couple of steps goes back and forth, and those servers now talk to each other. And now if I put something in a group at DGGS, that shows up as an item automatically in the DNR portal. So I don't have to create it twice. The data still stays in my portal. There's still password issues and such if people want to access it, but people at least can find that data in the DNR portal. So that's a huge plus, and that's where we want to eventually have sharing between other agencies. And I just put others in general. Who else? Who knows how we actually want to set up this collaborative grid like I talked about at the very beginning. Then the other piece that kind of, and the other important piece is there is no ArcGIS Online account at the state level as far as I know. Terry could tell me otherwise. But when you stop and think about it, there's nothing at the state level. And for many years, we were just thinking of this ArcGIS Online site as kind of an important thing. Well, Erin, as part of her being a smart person, says I could do something at work and for her final project in the degree she was working on, kill two birds with one stone, and put together the DNR open data site. So basically, the important piece is, again, like I said, that's a portal, but it's not like you have to build it, you know, like the data again and move the data into the portal. It references the data from some other ArcGIS Online location. Right now, and it's not, I don't think anytime in the near future, theoretically there could be a collaboration from an enterprise portal out to this, but not in the near future. So we have this here, and I know we've talked in a previous talk, a couple of other, you guys already have a bunch of open data sites. I picked a few of them here, and if you're not there as your own special box, you're in the others, because I knew I wouldn't get them all. And then Erin has also set up a open data site for the state of Alaska. So this is where I would envision the majority, if someone just wants to go to the state of Alaska and look for some data, this would be the easiest way to do it without spending a whole lot of money, is getting our references to all the other work you've done into this open data site. Now, that works quite well if your portals are strictly open data sites or an ArcGIS Online account. It would still, how to say, you take something that is not within that ESRI universe of getting it in there, directly linked to it. And because remember, at this point, there's no funding for anything at the state level to kind of put this together. So that's the thing that is a bit tricky. Since these slides will be online, you'll be able to see the links as of today at least, or yesterday, to all those sites. And really, again, what drives collaborations are driven by groups within the portals. You put something in a group, and it collaborates with another group. So that's how that works. So how do we set up these groups is important, that we have to begin to kind of understand together. And keywords is the major driver on how things get brought into open data sites. And getting a handle on making sure people know when they put a keyword in. If they put in a certain keyword and your organization has that set up for open data site and it's public, and it's in the, and also in the open data group, it will pop up into the various, you know, boxes that people will search for. So this is the piece over here on the left that we had been working on and then thinking, well, maybe this portal up here might be the key place people are going to find data. But it appears that's not necessarily the place to do it because it's not as user-friendly. The question is, what does this enterprise state portal do? Is it required? Should we do it? Or not? And again, over time. Now, so if you want to see more about how we took Portal, installed it on a mobile system, mobile-ish, it's about 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot, weighs about 100 pounds. But you could take it to the field, and we could do collector applications for 2, 3, 4 weeks out in the field and do all our work out there, because you have to be able to collaborate between multiple mobile users at the end of each day, you have to connect to Portal. And if you're out in the middle of the woods with no access to your office portal or ArcGIS Online, there's no way that people can collaborate at the end of the day. So we actually installed Portal on our own system, take it offline, we can take it with us, and I'll talk about that Friday after afternoon. So, any questions? I think it's
No, mesmerized. No, this is, well, I got introduced to Mike, I guess maybe a month ago or so, through our folks at DNR, and these are our regular attendees and
yeah, they offered me up as a sacrifice.
Exactly. Unfortunately, we have this nice conference going on, and Mike happened to be in town. This is something that we talked about for 3 years, and we did some initial work with Ann at the time, with Matt Suburo, to set up that, that far right piece, like an open data, portable portals, and so forth, right? Now, I've really not tapped into all the mechanics behind, but this is really, we worked on some work about the metadata tags and a number of things with Ann. It was just never getting the traction that I could see, right? So we had a little working group at the time back in 2016 and 2017. And I talked to Mike briefly about this a few weeks ago, and I specifically brought up the metadata and so forth. The idea is we need that common terminology and reference points so you can build layer upon layer and not have a collision. I'll say it in my non-technical way. But this is great. I'd like to see the sites, and then I'd like to just take it offline, and we'll see whether this has some legs going forward. I know there's been a lot of, obviously, the cutbacks and so forth to the state. I'm not sure if this is a core service. Has in the front page today. But nevertheless, it's always great to see you all that are passionate about this. Personally, I love analytics. I love maps. And I'd like to see this. Question for you, though, is, and for all of us really just to think about, is how do we know what else to deliver to that portal? You know, the demand part of the upper right-hand corner, as opposed to, as Eric would say, a self-leaking ice cream cone, right? Because we all like it's cool, and then no one visits. So, but I don't know if in your work, is there a demand, or even at DNR, do you see a need for that upper right-hand corner, that right-hand side, that says people are looking and having to make this easier for all the data that you serve up at the state or have at the state? You do see that? And who are some of those, I guess, customers or people who are telling you that they want it?
I get emails every week from people all over the country that are looking for Alaskan data of various kinds.
These are engineering firms or?
Engineering firms, utility companies, universities, yeah, students sometimes.
I think you also have the issue where it's, you know, when you build the road, they will use it. They don't know what they don't have access to also. So getting as much available in an easy way so people can just quickly search for, you know, Alaska hot springs. Boom, there's a layer pops up there right now. And again, that's the problem is there's a fair amount of data in various places, but then if you type in Alaska hot springs, I don't know that one specific, but a lot of times when I do that, you end up with like, you know, Joe Bag of Donuts Hot Springs service from grad school back in 2014 that shows up like the second hit. And you're like, well, how about that? So, you know, it might be good, actually. You don't know. So there's just all sorts of stuff comes out, too, as well. And kind of keeping metrics of. And I've spent only time on the bottom left up until just a few weeks ago. So I'm heading that way.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
First of all, this was fantastic group and very well laid out. Thank you. While this was coming up over the last few years, we had a question from the Geospatial Council saying, you know, if ArcGIS Online is a portal, why do we stand up our own portal? What's the advantage of having our own portals when this online is a portal? And I heard you answer that in your briefing, but maybe you could summarize that to the group. Why is it advantageous for us as small organizations to have our own portals that feed the online ones?
Yeah, I know when Kenny particularly was, his focus, which I'm agreed to a large extent, was you know, when you actually have the portal itself here, when this is on your machine, the advantage is You pay for the site license for that machine, and anything you do on it is free, in essence, after that initial significant cost. And having someone, so the negative is you have to take care of it. The positive is now you can put whatever data, whatever apps, however many hits, whatever you want to do. So that's the advantage of using the enterprise portal. And this data store is local, as opposed to the ArcGIS Online data store is up on the cloud, and there's credits, and at some point you'd use too much. You could argue, and I don't know the metrics, that we're not going to ever use too much in ArcGIS Online, and why bother to worry about having to maintain this piece. Now, the other way that you could argue the goodness of having the enterprise portal is if you put it completely behind your firewall, then it is the place where the internal sharing at the agents, and I think a couple of the boroughs are doing this, that's how you can just share data real quick. And you don't really care if a zillions of weird stuff ends up on there. If some person in whatever agency wants to share their map they just made, they share it, and everyone goes, oh, hey, how about that? I didn't know you had that data. I could use that. We don't do that very well at all, sharing amongst ourselves. But if we could just get people to say, oh, you made something for a PowerPoint presentation that shows mineral densities you just worked on, and they make that as a shared layer. Now anyone else who wants to use it has access to it. So that's the other goodness to it. It's a little easier to do all that in your own portal behind your firewall then. Because my understanding is the kind of the portal technology, now 10 years ago was built for intelligence agencies so they could do ArcGIS Online stuff secretly. Any other questions? All right, great.
Mike, thanks so much. All right, we got Ryan. There you go. Sorry, Ryan, we're compressing here, so see how you can do, and then we'll shave a little bit off of each of the presentations.
Okay.
That's wrong one. And there's your, gotcha.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Quigley. I'm a land surveyor with DOT Right-of-Way Engineering. I've been with the department about 16 years. I'm going to start this talk off with a little bit of a warning and maybe kind of an apology. I'm a runner, so if an earthquake happens, I'll be headed either towards that door or that door. I'm still can run pretty fast, but I can't turn as quick as I used to, so if you just let me go through, it'll probably go better. I take some comfort in the fact that when you think about the statistics, having only run maybe 3 or 4 times since November, the difference between myself as a runner and you, what you're supposed to be doing, which is duck and cover, I would say that there's a statistically insignificant difference between us. And that's it. Thank you. I don't know what happened here. Oh, there's the pointer. Maybe it went to sleep here. I don't know if I did this. Doug, are you? He's getting snacks. I lost my presentation. While Doug's getting that up and running, I'll go ahead and start. I know we're short on time, so. As I said, I work at DOT Right-of-Way Engineering. I'm a land surveyor. I'm located in Central Region, in the Central Region headquarters building over by Lake Hood. Okay. I have some slides to go with this, but I'll have to draw you a picture with my voice. I'm in the Central Region headquarters building. We're that upside-down building that you see on the right-hand side near Lake Hood. I don't know why it's the upside-down building. I guess maybe it was built in the 60s or 70s, so that might have something to do with it. This is, as I said, this is our headquarters building, so there's about 300 people there. I'm involved in the design portion of this, so I'm involved in the section that is heading towards acquisition. So I'm drawing several different maps. I work in AutoCAD all day, and I'm doing really heavy research. I was really surprised when Doug asked me to talk because I'm not a GIS person, but I'm a very heavy consumer of that GIS data that you guys are all creating and making available through these open portals. So we really appreciate what you guys are doing. It's really helpful to us, and I'm hoping I can share a little bit of that with you today. There you go. Oh, you got a little battery.
You had to trace down the power. Energy's kind of important.
So if I remember my outline correctly, the first thing I'm going to talk about is a little bit about our organization and what we do. I'm going to talk about the different type of maps that we use and then the type of data that we're using and why we're using it. And then I'd like to go into real briefly about some of the other things that we're doing in our building for those of us who are trying to implement and make use of these new tools that we have. About a year ago, I was given access to ArcGIS Online. I got an email from my boss, who got an email from her boss, who got an email from his boss, and from his boss that said, hey, we have ArcGIS Online, go use it. I said, okay, let's go use it. And I found out pretty quickly that it was going to be a huge time saver for us and a great tool. Thank you, Doug. There we go. So I think I covered that. So this, as I said, I'm in Central Region. That's the tan area that you see right there in the middle. We used to also include the Aleutian Islands and Kodiak, and that was transferred to South Coast Region about 4 or 5 years ago. This is our building there on the bottom right, the upside-down building. It's also known as the Aviation Building. It used to house the Division of Aviation as well as the State Troopers. And that blue sign down there on the left is all the different groups that are involved working in that building. And I fall under the Highway Design and Construction section. So what does right-of-way engineering do? Well, some people think that this is what we do. And I'm not going to say that this has never happened. It may be a couple times, but we're not this young. We're not this beautiful, and we're not this stylish either. This is us. This was a picture that we took at Christmas time. We have 7 professional land surveyors. We have a right-of-way researcher, a drafter, a title person, and a plan reviewer. A number of years ago, I saw David Copperfield come to Anchorage. Did anybody else go to see that? Yeah, maybe? Are you stretching? No? She did see, okay. I've never been a believer in magic, and I wasn't any more so after that, but I told everybody kind of at a surprise, I said, let's take a group photo for Christmas. And poof, 30% of the people disappeared. It was amazing. The lesson there is you got to tell people a little bit ahead of time if you want to get them all in the photo. So that's about 2/3 of us. The other thing that people think we do is that we connect the dots. And the reason they think this is because one of the deliverables that comes to us from the other group of surveyors at DOT, known as location surveyors, is they give us an AutoCAD drawing with points in it. And those points represent the property corners that they located in the field. So their role in this is to document the physical field evidence that represents a boundary. And our job in right-of-way engineering is to compare that to the written or title evidence, and we kind of squish them together into a map. So what you might say, what we really do is that we answer that question, what, where, and how wide is the right-of-way? And who wants to know that? Well, we have project managers, of course, who are scoping road projects. We've got utility companies who are looking to install facilities, and they either want to be inside the right-of-way or they want to be outside the right-of-way, so they need to know where that line is. And then you have surveyors who are subdividing property along the corridor, and they, of course, need to know where the line is. And then property owners who are looking to install driveways or build houses, build garages, and it's important for them, obviously, to know where that line is. All in all, if you could say that all of them are investing either in infrastructure or improvements to their properties. So we need to get that right. And how do we do that? Well, we have 3 different mapping products. They're all generated in AutoCAD. And the first one is what we call a right-of-way base map, and you can think of that as existing ground for property interests in the corridor. And so it identifies any public right-of-way and any platted utility easements. And it also has the legal descriptions and locations of any adjoining properties. The second product, this is also in AutoCAD, is what we call a right-of-way plan or right-of-way acquisition plat. And this is a base map plus any new design information. So when the engineers are widening the road, they give us cuts and fill slopes. Sometimes they go outside of that right-of-way line, and so then we have to draw acquisition parcels around those. And I'm sorry, that right-of-way plans, that gets submitted to our funding agency. The primary agency is Federal Highways Administration, and it also goes to the local platting authorities, so Matsu Borough, Municipality of Anchorage, Kenai Peninsula Borough for platting approval. And it falls under the plat regulations or plat subdivision code, but the primary difference is that on a standard subdivision, you're taking a big square and you're breaking it up into many different parts and pieces, creating different legal descriptions. For a right-of-way acquisition plan, we're reaching out, we're taking bites to adjoining properties, and we're incorporating that into the right-of-way. The third product is a parcel plat, and that's just an exhibit of the parcels that are identified in the right-of-way plans. And that goes to the acquisition agents who use that to negotiate with property owners. So I was asked that question, what's the right-of-way in 2009 on the Palmer-Wasilla Highway? And it was a Friday, and all the more experienced people were gone, so I thought I'd just take a crack at it and see if I could figure this out. So I did what we normally did at that time, and I went to our network folder and into our scan mapping folder and then into the Matsu folder. And currently our scan mapping folder has 24 gigabytes of files, 2,100 folders, and 8,300 files. And if you've worked with land title at all, you know that one page out of those 8,300 files can make the difference. It can help you make that determination. So being familiar with these files is crucial. So I went to that Matsu folder and I looked under the letter P. Everything's alphabetical here as any network folder. And I spent maybe 45 minutes or an hour going through 4 or 5 different plan sets for Palmer-Wasilla Highway. There's bike path projects, there's intersection projects, there's roads that cross the Palmer-Wasilla Highway projects, and I didn't find any mapping for this particular piece of property or in front of this property. So I went, the next stop was the DNR recorder's office, and I started looking around, and I stumbled on a deed, and it was a highway deed that had been acquired by the Department of Highways, our predecessor agency. And it was for a project called S0525 Perrin 1 Wasilla to Palmer. Well, I hadn't looked under the letter W on our network folder, so I went back to the network folder, looked under the letter W, and sure enough, there it is, Wasilla to Palmer. It's a map that was created in 1980. It's an unrecorded map, so you don't have access to it through the recorder's office. And it actually acquired about 120 parcels, and it mapped the whole corridor. So it was a really significant piece of property, or excuse me, mapping. And to me, that really illustrates the problem here. We lost our location. As a field surveyor, we spent a lot of effort making sure that the coordinate systems we're working in are relatable to the real world, interchangeable with other data. We measured to the millimeter or to the 100th of a foot. We spent great pains to do accurate surveys. And at the end of the day, when on a right-of-way plan set, the closest you get is a regional folder called Matsu. And you have to know where to look to find something. And when you're new, you don't know where to look. So we're missing something. So imagine all the years that have gone by on the Palmer-Wasilla Highway. I don't know how many hundreds of parcels there are that people did the same thing I did trying to find the map. And hopefully they found it, but maybe they didn't. I don't know. And who knows what kind of information they've given out. So I think this illustrates that location problem pretty well. So how are we solving that? Well, leading up to ArcGIS Online, we had a project around 2007 or 8 that scanned all of our right-of-way maps that are in our files. Maybe 65, I guess about 65 to 75% of those are recorded, so there's still a significant amount of mapping that we have that's unrecorded. I don't know what's controlled, whether maps have been recorded over the years. It's been really sporadic, different eras, different organizations. And then in 2014, somebody in northern region working with a programmer down in Juneau created a web portal for downloading our right-of-way maps. And then shortly after that, somebody in our group indexed all of our right-of-way plans with all these search parameters that you see up here. trying to use the pointer. There we go. Here's all the search parameters. We've got keyword, we've got project name, we've got road name, what community it's in, but most importantly, we have Meridian Township Range and Section. So as time went on and we started using this portal more and more in our office, some of us moved exclusively to this portal rather than using our network folders, because now when we enter that information in, although we only get within a square mile of all the maps, for right-of-way mapping that's good enough. It doesn't take that much time to go through the few maps that are located in that one particular section. The most important thing is that we knew that we got all of them, so we know that we searched for everything that we have. And that's where the location information is important. So in 2008, when I got that email, or excuse me, 2018, I got that email that said, here's ArcGIS Online, go for it. The first thing I did was I started messing around with the base maps. I thought, this is pretty cool. We've got photography, we've got USGS quad maps. I mean, that alone was, I thought, pretty cool. And then the next thing I figured out is that I could connect to other GIS servers and pull that data in live. And I think the first thing I did was I found the DNR server. And so I went and I grabbed all the data that I could and I threw it in my map, and I thought, wow, this is pretty awesome. I now have the public land survey system information that I need. So when I need to go to the right-of-way map page, I can look at it really quick and enter it, or I can copy and I can paste it in. And that was pretty awesome. But it wasn't long before I ended up with a layer list on the side panel that was about this long. And as any of you know who've used ArcGIS Online, that's a little bit of a problem. It's hard to manage. I understand that there's an update coming maybe this year that's going to allow us to manage that a little bit better, crossing my fingers. But then I soon discovered, of course, the Kenai Peninsula Borough server and the Matsu Borough server and the municipality server. And then that layer list, I mean, it exploded at that point. So then I decided to duplicate the map and then create 3 different ones. And those links you see on the bottom are the links to the 3 different web apps that we're using. So this is what a typical right-of-way acquisition plan looks like. This one's a little more crowded than some, but it's not all that unusual. You can see that we've identified the public right-of-way in this hatched area here and here. We have acquisition parcels that have been identified here. We have tables down here that identify the owner name and the square footages. And we're also showing any platted utility easements that are along the corridor. And then, of course, the design information, which is right here. This is West Alling Phase 1. I think it's at C Street. So as you can see, we're pulling in a significant amount of data. And these are all the different sources that we're using on a regular basis. And when I put this slide together, I was shocked. I could not believe how many different servers we're using. And what we figured out, primarily with the DNR PLSS layer, is that a lot of these sources that are primary research resources, which is BLM, you're required to enter the Meridian Township Range and Section information. And we figured out that we could grab those attributes out of the DNR PLSS layer, and using some arcade programming in the background, we're able to format those into a way that will pre-fill those web pages using the URL. So now, in some cases, we're able to actually download that information or get to that information much quicker, and we're not having to retype that information from every one of these different data sources. The BLM one, each one of those represent a different web page that we had to go to and re-enter that information. Now that happens automatically with a click of a mouse. It's fantastic. I'm just going to skip through these. These are all the different data points that we're using. Most of the maps use all of these, depending on where you are. The ones that you see here that are turning orange are actual layers that we're connecting to directly. So all that information is in those web apps right now. The ones that you see turning red are ones that use other GIS layers and manipulate those attributes to either directly download the information that we need or get us to it much faster. And then, so we're using primarily the DNR PLSS layer, but also the DNR Recorders District map. And what that's doing for us is that it's shortening the amount of data entry we need to enter in order to get all this information out of the recorder's office. We actually, by clicking on subdivision plats on that layer, it's taking us into the subdivision search with the recording district pre-selected. So that's pretty helpful. Some of the other uses that are going on in the building right now, I wanted to touch on briefly. The November 30th earthquake was kind of obviously a traumatic event, but something that we did was we started using Survey 123, and somebody set up a form. This was done in engineering. I'm not sure who did it, but they set up a form for data collection, and has anybody here used Survey 123? Are a lot of you using that? Yeah, okay, so you're familiar. So you can customize the form to prompt the user to input any information you want, including taking photos. And so what they did is they pushed out a form to people's mobile devices. They went to the sites, they took the photos, they hit send, it ends up in a server immediately. It's fantastic. It's a great solution. Our property management group, we set up a form for them for doing driveway inspections. So if you're going to install a driveway that is connected to a state road, you need to go through a permitting process. And at the end of that process, someone has to do an inspection. And what they're looking for is they want to make sure that the drainage features that you've installed won't damage the road facility. They want to make sure that the sight lines are safe, that people are entering the traffic flow safely. And so they do a final inspection to make sure that the person who built it followed all these safety features. And what they used to do is they used to take a paper form out, and they would take a digital camera with them, and they would fill out the form as they're there. They'd take their pictures, they'd go back to the office, they would scan the form, and then they would download and then rename the photos, and then they would email that to the appropriate staff for filing. And sometimes the staff in our office will do these inspections themselves, depending on where they are. But if they need to do an inspection down in Kenai or Homer or something, they ask the maintenance people quite often to do this. And so we set up a form for them. We haven't quite got a chance yet to push it out to maintenance, but we're going to be experimenting with that this spring once we get some more driveways going on. Not too many customers installing driveways in February, so this is just kind of illustration of kind of some of the steps that we've cut out using Survey 123 for property management. So I just want to say, for myself and for our group, we just want to say a big thank you to all of you who have made this data available and have made it open. It is very convenient for us, and it saves us a ton of time. And if it can ever help you when you're trying to justify budgets, you may not see this in your budget, but the budgets that we have that are the transportation dollars that are in your region, those transportation dollars are going farther because we have access to this data. So it is awesome, and we really appreciate it. And we're always looking for more data sources, so if anybody here knows of any other data sources that you'd like to email me, please do. You can email me there with my address or give me a call. I'd love to hear about it. So thank you. Are there any questions? Yes?
Yes, I guess I've hit the app before, and I'm just trying to recall just the multiple colored lines and so forth. I'm looking at a lot of information that not only, I guess, is collected for that right-of-way, but I guess I'm seeing here is that I've got data on that website that brings together all this information, or information from all these sources.
Yeah, our web maps bring in information from all these sources. And that goes into the AutoCAD drawing that then becomes the right-of-way plan.
Right. So as far as the use for this, I've had a couple forums ago.
Mm-hmm.
MTA, Robbie, right? So Robbie Nash was talking about information and sharing information between agencies and so forth and so on. So, I mean, do you see a lot of uptake from this tool, this site, from different agencies and even local jurisdictions? I mean, having access to this, I guess, have you pushed it out to them, and are they consuming it, and what has been the feedback?
I really don't know. I mean, it's the maps are open, the web maps and the web apps are open. I'm hearing occasionally from people who say that they like to use it, but I have no idea. I don't know how many people are actually using it. I mean, I can see the count, the use count, but other than that, I'm not sure who is using it.
So the big game that you see though, but so in your office though?
Yeah. Oh, everyone's using it. Yeah. In our more particularly in right-of-way engineering, but some of the engineering groups are also using either my map or versions of it that the GIS group has put out. We do have a GIS group. They're down in Juneau. They're transportation GIS. The rest of us are just trying to figure it out.
So I guess as far as the website's being publicly accessed, right? So level of information is presented on a public facing, but then you need some kind of authorization and access to access other information from that place, or?
Are you talking about like the web app that I've got? No, all of it's open. I mean, it's all, I mean, all this data that we have, that you see coming in from these GISs are in those web apps. Some of them are turned on by default, some are turned off, but they are, all that information is there. Yeah, I hope that's not a problem.
That's,
I mean, they're open servers, I mean, we.
well, no, but data privacy had come up a couple of years ago.
Oh,
That
sure.
might be a topic that we talk about later. I mean, it's more insulated to, like, say, maybe there's a trail that passes a private property owner, they want that trail published and so forth.
Right.
Has that.
Yep.
And so that's just, you know, to be determined, correct? So,
Yeah, I heard you say something about there's the data access and then there's the ease of access. And I think that this has made that data much more accessible, much more quickly in a mobile device, really. And I have concerns about that, but it's such a powerful tool for us. I am not willing to stop using it yet but if someone tells me to, I will. I mean, yeah, yeah.
no, that's great. And I think this from a consumer level, you look at right away, and then you kind of sit here and it's kind of stunned with how many different databases might have information and influence a particular location in the right away.
Yeah, I knew we did a lot of research, but when I had graphed this out for this presentation, I was really shocked. I didn't realize it was that many. So, yeah. Is there a question? Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
How are you guys using the data through AutoCAD? We have a lot of people in Matsu that use AutoCAD. The question always comes up of how do I use your GIS? It'd be great to hear what you guys do.
There are ways to bring GIS data live into AutoCAD, and I've messed around with it a little bit, but it wasn't enough for me. My screen just got too busy. It just polluted my view, and I couldn't use it. Usually we're going back and forth. I have two monitors, so I'm using AutoCAD on one screen, and then have GIS open, the GIS web apps open in the other. I have gone to the step of exporting AutoCAD design work and putting it into the GIS maps. And that really helps a lot. If I've got a design center line, which is what the whole project is based on, I can reference back and forth really quickly between the two of them. But other than that, we're not doing much. They don't, I think without those more powerful desktop tools, we're not able to really make that data interchangeable. So, yeah. All right.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Yep.
All right, it's time for a break, so take 10 minutes. We got still some more food back here. The bathrooms, I'm told, if you haven't found it already, are down the hallway, down the stairs, and to the right. And then we'll start in 10 minutes with a little bit of an overview from Matt Super.
Doug, I'm going to just go ahead and use my machine.
Okay.
So let's do a quick swap.
Okay.
Which is the video, the white one?
Yep.
Want to yank that? Okay. Mine finally, I just rebooted the thing. Gotcha. And I think I've got enough battery to surf. I'm gonna work right from the laptop here, so that'll work out just fine. I'm getting hungry.
All right, if you guys can just take a quick seat, and we're going to get started with Eric on the Matsu Burrow.
All right, how are we doing? It's, Doug, if you talk to Thane back here, say, come on, sit down. And maybe Dan and Tasha, yeah, round them up, bring them in. All right, get everybody back. Well, this is kind of the part of the program. I can't really follow those previous speakers very well, so this might be the good time just to have some more cake and fruit and take a little break, because generally anything I've got to say probably isn't very much fun anyway. But, so one of the things we do at the Matsu to start out all of our meetings is, we try to inject a little humor into everything. And this Christmas, I got from one of my coworkers a fun little game called Punderdome. And Leah's about ready to run up here and take this away from me, but it's too late. I got it out. So we're going to start out with a little, some of the fun that we have at the Matsu Burrow. We do this every day. Why did the orchestra sound fake? Why did the orchestra sound fake? That's good. What was that? They were a symphony. Okay, it's going to get better from here. I promise. It's going to get better. Okay, good. Well, to start out with, I want to start out our portion of the presentation here with to let you know that I was planning on doing this last August, okay, and kind of show off some of the things that we've been doing that kind of pull a lot of what you've heard earlier today, kind of pull that together and how we're using it in the borough. And I was going to do it last August, but I don't know, something happened in July and we got a little busy. And I think actually at this meeting in August, we talked about the cyber attack instead of. And so, one of the things, obviously, that we're going to kind of wrap up with today is some security. Mike's going to talk to us about security. And that is a lot of what we are doing with these portals and with the data and all this kind of stuff is great. But when the bad guys attack it and it all goes away, all of those cost savings, time savings, collaborations, all that goes away just like that. And so that's why the security is absolutely important. We've also talked a little bit, I've talked to many groups about, some of the whys of this happen, why a cyber attack like this happens. And one of those things is, as we're talking about what we're talking about today, especially from the government side of the house here, all of our data is public. Our data is your data. You own it. We're getting it out there. Why would you steal it, right? So we might get complacent and say, nobody wants to steal our data. We're putting it online for everybody. And where the data ownership portion of that may be true, obviously the criminals have other motivations. to bring us down. So security is often important for us. I also would like to lead off by talking about this group a little bit. And sometimes I get questions in the borough, why are we spending our time and resources on smart communities? Why aren't we spending our time and resources on other things? And I will tell you that the payback from this group was huge during our cyber incident. Because of this community, because of our networking, because of the friendships and professional relationships that we've put together, that the people that have come back to us then and helped us through that cyber incident was tremendous. So the return on investment was absolutely huge. So not only in that small incident, but I think as many of you are seeing, when we start to share data and we start to save time, I think the return on investment is large. So I'm happy to see all of you here, and I hope that we can keep this up and keep this going. So what I would like to do then is I'd like to kind of take you through some of the things that the borough's been doing, and it kind of pulls together some of the other things that we've heard about today. This is our Matsu Borough public website. Jack Horner's our webmaster here. He's the guy that put this together for us, does a wonderful job, and I think that's actually him standing on top of the mountain there in the picture, right about there. Is that you, Jack? Okay. Yeah, okay, everybody can see that all right. And of course, any of the open data and any of these tools that you want to find that are public can be found from this website. You can start right over here with property and maps. Parcel Viewer, which I think a lot of you are probably very familiar with, the Matsu Borough Parcel Viewer. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of these apps as well. Before I do that, I'm going to start with our intranet. So I want to, not make this all about web apps and maps, but this is a version of another kind of a portal. This is our intranet. And so this is also a portal. And from this internet, it allows people within the borough to find data in various enterprise systems in various locations. We can store data in this. We can also access data from other locations. One of the things that I was faced with when I first got to the borough were a whole bunch of departments that were kind of siloed. Everybody was doing their own thing. Anybody here work in an organization that's somewhat siloed? Anybody? Anybody? Just a few? Okay. Cylinders of excellence. That's right. Very, very good. And so one of the first complaints that I heard when I got to the borough was that we had a lot of cylinders of excellence. We don't know where data is. We can't find it. It takes a long time to find any kind of data, and there should be some kind of a collaboration tool. Well, we are very much a Microsoft shop. Microsoft has a collaboration tool called SharePoint. I had a lot of experience in my past with that. So I knew that this was going to be the tool that we needed to build a collaboration platform. So just real briefly on some of the stuff that we put on there. Obviously, we throw some calendars up there, some classified ads. This is kind of a new thing we've been doing the last several months. Okay. One of the things that we put together is each department can still have their cylinder of excellence right here. So each of these represents a sub-site on SharePoint. And then for all of those things that all of us in all of the departments do, we've built these things called management sites. And so one of the things that I've worked on real hard, and my team has worked on real hard with me, is putting together some of these items down here: portfolio management, process management, project management, strategic planning and training. And I want to walk you through a little bit of that and really show you how the culmination of some of the things we've been talking about have come together. So I'm going to start with portfolio management. Okay, and this is a service portfolio. So everybody is probably familiar with a financial portfolio. And what do you do in your financial portfolio? You've got your resources in various investments, and you track to see how those resources are doing. You know, they're making 7%, they're making 3%, they're losing money, whatever. And if they aren't performing the way you want them to perform, maybe you want to move your money out of one investment into another,
and that's your financial portfolio. Well, if you look at an organization like ours, we've got the same kind of a thing, although it's not a financial portfolio so much as it is a service portfolio. So we put this together to show what are the services that the Mat-Su Borough provides to its citizens, and then how do we manage that, okay? And then can we have a site where we list all of them, and then we can go down and look at them and then see how they're doing? And can we have a single place where we can go get all the information that we need about that particular service? And so that's the idea behind this portfolio management. And we kind of put it together, and understanding how we manage our entire organization. We start with our organizational vision and mission, which most organizations have. And then our organizational strategy. This is kind of our 50-year plan for what we're trying to do in the borough. And then we get down to our portfolio management. And it turns out that this was not just something that I cooked up in the intellectual meth lab of my office, as Joe likes to say. But this actually is a discipline that comes out of the Project Management Institute, or the PMI. And so what supports your portfolio is your strategic goals. Now, these strategic goals are your 3 to 5 year plans, where this is your 50-year plan, this is your 3 to 5 year plan. And they might have various programs associated with that. A service catalog, which is kind of your menu of current offerings in whatever that portfolio item may be, and then your operations. Your operations are supported by your processes, policies, and training. Your strategic goals then drive projects, and your projects then act upon your service catalog and your goals. So kind of putting that whole picture together, and then putting that together on our intranet so that for any one of those areas, we can drill down into this and see how this stuff fits together. As we roll down through the site there, for the borough portfolio of services, you might recognize some of these things that are on here, that this is what the borough does for its citizens. These are the big picture versions of all of the services that we provide. And again, the idea being is that you can click on any one of those, drill down deeper, and find the information about that service, how it's supported, who's using it, who's in charge of it, what's the budget, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? We'll pull an example here. We're going to look at a couple other examples, but I'll just do one at random here. Each of these is in SharePoint terminology, is a subsite. And for each portfolio, you might have announcements or whatever here. You've got a budget. You can delineate the business value. You have some communication plan, issues, links, metrics we're going to talk about, processes, program, projects, resources, periodic review, service catalog, as we talked about, what strategic goals does it support, who is the steering committee, and task list. So we put these sites together with kind of a template. So every portfolio item has all of these tabs in it and the ability to track all these things about the portfolio item, but not every portfolio item might need all these things. So when the site is created like this, kind of look at this as a tool bench. This is your entire tool bench with all of your tools on there. But if today I'm going to build a birdhouse, I don't need all my tools. So I would just use the tools that I need. So we have built this, and I'm going to have a little shout out to my team members here, with Jack and Joe and Tasha and Leah and Dan and Margie and Stan. As I look around the room here, and Doug, a lot of folks in this room have been part of the team to help us put this together. And now the real challenge is to get the rest of the borough to use it. But I think with what I've got to show you today, I think it really drives the point home. So we've been putting together this site, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to kind of roll down here into one of the portfolio items is called web apps and maps. Well, this is what we've been talking about today, right? And so in SharePoint, not all of this data exists. A lot of this data exists in our Esri or ArcGIS portal, or maybe in other locations. But this gives us that portal or that window into all of those things. So this particular one, I think, is very pertinent for today, and really one that I'm very, very proud of, that our team's done an excellent job. So what we've got then is 4 web apps and maps, the stuff we've been talking about all day. We can come down here and we can show what we currently have as an offering. So let's look here. We've got the Public Protection Classification PPC Viewer, FEMA flood maps at Hillshade, land management sales, Find My Elementary School, Find My Middle School, My High School, LIDAR data, mailing lists, facilities map, cartograph. I mean, look down through that. Wow. We've got lots of web apps and maps that we have been producing. Now, some of these are available to the public. Some of these are available internally. And so as we talked about earlier, and Mike was talking about the portal of portals and GIS, some of these are available through ArcGIS Online. Some of these available just internally, just to our internal folks. But from our standpoint internally here, I can come to this list, I can see everything, and then I can go find out more about it. Let's see, I think I opened a tab. So I wanted to look at one in particular, and this one was Find My Elementary School, okay? So as I open this up, I've got 2 links in here. One's a system link, one's a dashboard link, so I've got 2 different things I want to look at. One is I want to go look at the system itself, or the application, and then the other one is I want to see who's using it. That came up today earlier, didn't it? We're putting all this stuff online, but so what? Is it a self-licking ice cream cone, or are people actually using this? And so what we're going to look at on the second one are the metrics. Let's look at the app itself first. So when you click on this link, it opens up this page, and this takes you to ArcGIS Online, and then we can go view the application. And I've actually got it open here already. So it starts here, and now we're recognizing the map and the app that we've been talking about earlier today. And then let's do a quick little execution of this. And I'm just going to put in an address at completely at random. And it worked earlier. No results. Oh, you're killing me. All right, let's refresh it. Try it again. I promise, I just did this like 30 minutes ago. It worked. So while this is coming back up, I'm going to talk a little bit about smart communities and about partnerships. So you're saying, hey, wait, Matsu-Borough, why are you putting out an app that's Find My School? We don't run the schools. Well, the Matsu-Borough School District is actually a separate organization from us, but we are both funded by the same property taxes in the borough. So we actually are part of the same organization, but we've got the borough that I work in, and then we've got the school district, and we operate separately, but we're both funded from the same source. The school district is not going to have Esri tools the way we have Esri tools. Okay, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the personnel, they don't necessarily have the need. They have the need for this, but they don't necessarily have the need for that whole infrastructure. So by doing a little smart community here, by combining forces, we were able to put up this app for them, help them, and there you go. Now it's working. And put this app together and save them a bunch of time. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we're saving time. How this used to happen in the past is somebody would buy a house in the borough, and they would move into a neighborhood like this, and then they would call the school, and they'd say, where do my kids go to elementary school? And the people at the school then would pull out a piece of paper map, and they'd say, oh, well, here's your elementary school for your address. If it happened to be close to the line, it might be a little fuzzy, and it might not be completely accurate, and it would take quite a while. And now with this tool, you can see you can go online very, very quickly, and you can find out what school district they go to very, very accurately. This particular address, you can see, is right on the edge of a school district, and you can see that if this was a paper map with a thick line, you might not be certain where that came. So what this does then is this finds your address, and then it shows you where your elementary school is, just like that. And what you probably noticed earlier when I was showing you the big list of maps was that we have this for elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. So who is this going to be useful for? Well, this is going to be useful for the parents that have their kids going to school. This is going to be useful for the school district personnel because parents are still going to call and say, where do my kids go to school? But instead of looking at the paper map, they can go to this tool and they can buy it very quickly. This might be also useful to people who are house hunting. You say, you know, I want to move to the borough and I want to go to this school, and if I buy this house in this neighborhood, am I part of this school district or that school district? You know, where is it? And some people use that information to choose where they want to go to school. All right, so now we're going to log into the metrics. I got to try to remember this. I hope this works. I should have set this up earlier. Leah might be running up here to log on. I don't know. I do. Hey, look at this, security, multi-factor authentication, right there. Got it going on. That's why it's not down today, because I did this. I'm only 6 clicks away from getting in here. Okay, so, but now I got to be able to read it. Can somebody hold this out for me? 5, 4, oh. All right. Don't bother memorizing that. It changes every couple minutes. Okay. All right, so here we go. So now the second part of this is who cares? Well, let me show you right here who cares. So just for elementary schools, this is a 30-day snapshot of who is using the application. So in the last 30 days, we have averaged over 10 views of this application per day. So who is, you know, in this time of year, people are probably already in school and not looking for which school they're in. But even this time of year, in the last 30 days, we're getting 10.5 just for elementary schools. Now look at this graph a little bit. So are these school district employees that are using the app when people phone in? Those are the high spots in there. That's probably where you get most of the activity. But look at even on the weekends, it's not zero. Well, that's not school district employees, that's citizens. So that's parents, that's realtors, that's people shopping for homes, that's a whole bunch of different people. So this is a way then to have the app, some maps, have the metrics, and show, you know, why are we using this. Now I can pull up the other two maps, the middle school and the high school, and they show similar results. So just for this type of application, we've got 30 hits a day on average. And then right before, you know, before school and when it's time to register for school, that might go up a little bit because you have more people trying to figure out where they're supposed to go. So, Gary, question. Okay. Some kind of a portal, I'm thinking. But we have links to it on our website, and the school district has links for it on their website as well. So we do have a couple of different portals where people can find this and get to it quickly. And obviously a lot of folks are getting to it very quickly. Yeah. So this is, again, kind of a culmination of a lot of things that we've all been talking about. I've got a portal that's not a GIS portal, it's SharePoint. We're using that internally. But then we're using it to manage some of our information that is the GIS data. And then we're also able to very, very quickly just drill right down and find out who's using it and why it's important to us. And I think that's just a really great story of how we draw these things together and how we use them, how we work with other agencies. In this case, it's the borough and the borough school district. We're working together to use the tools and provide value to our citizens. One more thing I wanted to show, and we want to keep things moving here, so we are also using SharePoint for our e-commerce. And so anybody here used our e-commerce at all? So we've got a couple of people here that have used the e-commerce of the borough website. Again, before I got to the borough, we were limited. We had a little older e-commerce, so you could do a few things, but since then we've been trying to beef this up. So this is our public offering, our e-commerce website. You can see you can do business licenses, you can pay ambulance fees, driveway permits, which I think we talked about sometime today, Christmas trees and parking passes and so forth. This is also riding on top of that same SharePoint infrastructure. So, and just to kind of tie things together with some of Ryan's previous presentation about driveway permits, we can also do driveway permits on at the borough for borough-owned roads. So you click in here, you say you want a new permit, and there's a couple of things you got to go through to get to there, but here you enter your tabular information about the driveway permit. Now, again, this is being offered up through SharePoint, through our e-commerce. This data is actually going in our ArcGIS geodatabase, okay? And so we're entering all of this important information, and then we go down here, and we use a map, and we click on the map and say, right here, here's where I want my driveway. And so we've integrated the SharePoint portal and the ArcGIS portal, and we're serving up the data, we're serving up the maps, we're serving that all up in combination into one platform, right like this. And again, when we look at how did this stuff get done, the folks that I called out earlier in the group here have all had a hand in this, and so it's really taken a big team of smart people and quite a bit of time to help put this together. Again, I had this presentation kind of queued up right before the cyber attack, and so we were set back. This stuff was offline for a little while, but really from when the cyber attack happened till now, and we're all back online, this is pretty incredible. The team worked really hard to bring this stuff back, and they've done an excellent job. One last kind of thing, wanted to show a little bit about the project management site on here. And again, some of the partnering and some of the stuff that we talk about here in the smart communities. A project management site, so here's the overall site. You see I've got all my different departments, and we've got a place for all the different departments to manage their projects. Similarly, you can see over here, IT, we're the big winners with the 72 on there. I'm a little bit busy right now. I've got a few projects going on. Wanted to show you this one. This is just the projects that are related to our cyber attack. And you can see I've got some of them complete. Still got a few open. Some of them are on track and color-coded. And then I wanted to pull up one in particular. And I pulled up this one in particular because there's some folks here in the audience today that are helping us with this, our MetroNet speed links over here with MTA. We're going to upgrade our speed to all of our remote sites. We've got 46 remote sites in the borough, and we are working right now to upgrade speed to a great number of them. And so, Mike and Jackie, thank you for your help on this one. And for our project management, similar to our portfolio management, we've got lots of different things right out of a PMBOK, the PMI PMBOK, right out of just just, industry standard project management. And all of these tabs are areas that you want to be tracking in a project. So we put this site together. It's all in there ready to go for us. And helps us track our tasks and our issues and our deliverables and our budget, status reports. You can see over here objectives, scopes, requirements, communication plan, lessons learned, etc. One of the other things that we do with this then, this is our internal intranet, but when we have outside help on these things, when we have vendors and project managers and technicians and all kinds of folks in helping us with this, we give them VPN access into our network, and they come in here and collaborate with us directly, so that all the project team members can be part of the same package here, and we can all work on it together. So those are some things we've been working on at the borough for quite some time, down for a short period, months back, and this is one of the things that I'm talking with Nate Wallace over here at the city of Palmer about. I can then extend these tools to the city of Palmer and Wasilla and Houston and the other cities that are in there. Also, the buildup of this, of course, we've built this up as a government agency, so we're also happy to share this. I've shown this and shared it with the Muni project management as well, so the IT group there at the Muni. So again, how this got built up, happy to share that. Looking forward to sharing that with our partners and with the cities and the borough, and so we can all, again, not recreate the wheel, not have to stand up a whole new SharePoint site. We can just jump on here and start using that. So again, it's all part of our smart communities. So that's all I'm going to do for now. So how about some questions? Yes. Yeah. We do have a number of project managers that we're using. In fact, one of them is standing up right over here. Doug works for us as a project manager. Tasha and Joe both do project management for us. We manage some of these projects internally. Jack manages some of the projects internally. Leah's managing one of the projects. Dan Monarch over here. You have one or two or 10? Yeah. And so we do have people managing the different projects, yes. And part of the idea of the collaborative site here is that all project team members have access to this and can be making updates to it. So you have a project manager making sure that it's getting done, but all the team members are in there putting tasks, updating tasks, feeding statuses to the project manager, and so on. And then Joe Quickle does classes for us, so we can train the other people in the borough how to get on the site and use it. Being a SharePoint site and a sub-site, each individual project can also be modified. If we don't have the right tools in the tool bench on this site, we can add or subtract to that to match the project. So it's not, completely cast in stone. We can modify as we go. Yeah, absolutely. When we went through our cyber incident, of course, my project management tool went away. So I had this new piece of technology called a whiteboard. And we had everything listed on that for weeks before we got this tool back up. So it was good to know how to do project management even without a great tool. Good question. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. And again, if you want to see any more of that or any of these things, we'd be happy to share with you. Thank you.
kids, my boys like to come home with these goofy dad jokes and see if they can make me laugh. So, what do you call a cow with no legs? Ground beef. Good job. I'm supposed to be the serious speaker today, so I figured I'd lighten it up a little.
You're all set with this? All
Okay,
right.
And where's the handheld?
Right there.
Oh,
The handheld?
The mic.
Oh, gotcha.
So I have learned just a ton of information today. I don't normally participate in this type of industry with all the data sharing. Typically, the security guy's job is to come in and tell you how you can't do things. So we try and do things a little bit differently at Deep Forest Security. We believe that you should be able to do whatever you need to do to best serve your business and your clients. It's just that you have to do it safely. So I'm gonna go over kind of the state of what security looks like today, or rather who the bad guys are and what they're doing, and then give some pointers as to things that we can do to mitigate our risk a little. Shameless marketing slide. I won't go into everything here, but Deep Forest Security has been around for about 13 years, a little bit more. I founded the company with a couple of partners back in 2005. It's a blend of law enforcement and Fortune 5 experience. We kind of brought all that together and melded it into a company that's been serving primarily Alaskan businesses, but we have done some work out of state as well. So I'm going to try and compress this a little bit. If you do have questions, I guess we'll see how this goes. Raise your hands. I may try and save them till the end, but we'll try and accommodate everything here as best we can. So the current threatscape here, what I want to talk about is who the bad guys are today. You probably hear about certain cyber attacks that happen in the news. Obviously, we have, as I forget, maybe it was Doug that said the poster child of cyber attacks here, with the Matsu Borough. But the truth is, Deep Forest Security works with companies almost every single day that have been compromised through a number of different circumstances, through a number of different bad guys. The official term for bad guy is an actor. So I'll try and keep to the word actor here, but we call them bad guys because anyway. So we're going to go and explore here who the actors are that are driving the majority of the cyber attacks, not only within Alaska, but throughout the United States and frankly, all over the planet, really. When you talk about internet security, you really have to think globally, and you can take the lessons learned from the global environment, bring them down, and certainly every nation has their own unique interests, and so then you can bring those down and apply them at the local level. So the first bad guys that we all love to pick on are the nation-state actors, and again, that's a fancy term for foreign governments. They hire hackers to actively break into our networks, and I'm not sure who the bad guys were that broke into the Matsu Borough. I don't know that we'll ever know. And just like with most cyber attacks, typically we don't ever know. Now there have been some published events here over the past few years where the United States has actually indicted some of the cyber hackers from China, I think also from Romania. I just read about one of those guys last week that have all been not found guilty. They'll never be tried, but they've been indicted. They've been accused of breaking into not only government systems within the United States, but private industry. And what we're finding more and more is that these attacks are being driven down to the small business level, to the medium-sized business level. So they're not only hitting governments, but they're hitting all sorts of private businesses as well. And of course, your favorite nation states out there that you've probably read about in the news, the top three are, of course, Russia, China, and Iran. So if you have any Iranian hackers beating on your doors, let me know. I'd be very interested in talking with you. The second set are organized crime. And organized crime, it's typically organized crime syndicates in the Eastern European bloc. Sometimes they have Russian backing. Sometimes they're just organized crime that are working for themselves as well. And then, of course, we have the, I didn't really know what to call these guys. These botnet hackers. I was talking with the FBI cyber agent yesterday, and his label for them was, I think, really creative, very talented computer hackers that are trying to be entrepreneurial or something like that. But I told him it wouldn't fit into 2 words. So botnet hackers. These are guys that primarily for profit, are building up these botnets, and a botnet is just an army of computers that allows their controller to give them tasks, and they'll go out and perform these tasks. Typically, these tasks include denial of service attacks. So we have seen large parts of the internet actually go dark because of some of these 19-year-old geniuses that were mad at some of their friends. Okay, moving on to techniques. Has anyone ever been interested in how bad guys actually do what they do, how they break into computers? So we'll cover that a little bit today. There's a couple of technical terms. I tried to keep it as high level as possible, so I'll explain the geek speak in plain English. And if you have any questions, raise your hand. So the first step in attacking a network, you do a whole bunch of reconnaissance. You kind of survey the cyber land and figure out how you're going to break in. Excuse me. And once you get ready to go, you try and first of all establish what's called an initial foothold. And a lot of this is taken from military operations as well. So the bad guys try and establish an initial foothold. They try and compromise a single computer in your environment by doing any one of, I don't know, probably a dozen different things. I've listed a few of the more common ones here. Phishing, we've all probably received the dodgy looking emails. And the pro tip here is don't click on the link and don't open the attachment. I think we probably all have been painfully familiar with that. The next technique here is called brute force attacks. And that's simply where a bad guy sets up a program to connect to your web server or to your whatever server that you have out on the internet that accepts usernames and passwords. And this program just starts trying a combination of 1 million different user IDs and 1 million different passwords. And it's actually not that many. And if you use a username of Bob and a password of Cat, eventually, and actually sooner rather than later, because they typically have alphabetic word lists, the bad guy's going to get your username and password, and he's going to get to log in. And now he's got an initial foothold in your environment. Browser compromises, and these really range from everything from tricky scripts on poisoned websites down to they'll actually poison ad content on websites as well. So if you go out to CNN, you might see some ads listed out there, and if you click on one of those, and sometimes you don't even have to click, if you just visit CNN, your browser will actually infect your computer with the bad guy's code, and you don't even know it. So social engineering, it was specifically business email compromises. If bad guys can learn your email addresses, then they can send fake emails to you. They may compromise your environment and then start watching how the CFO behaves. And after a period of a couple of weeks, they'll send a magic email from the CFO to somebody in accounts payable instructing them to wire $3 million to this account because we have to have it for this business purchase that we're making. And so accounts payable person goes ahead, it makes that wire transfer, and 2 hours later, the CFO shows up at work and discovers that he paid someone he had no idea about. And that's actually a true story from about a week ago. Zero-day attacks. A zero-day is simply an attack that no one else knows about. So there are security researchers out there who spend all day, and a lot of them spend most of their nights as well, they just don't sleep, doing nothing but testing programs, testing web servers, testing SharePoint applications, testing GIS servers to see if they can figure out ways to trick those programs into doing things that they shouldn't. And if they can figure that out, they may publish that vulnerability, they may contact the vendor. A lot of them will keep that information private, and if they're working for a nation state, then they'll use that attack on their next target as applicable. Does that make sense? All right, so let's, oh yeah, and a note here, zero-day attacks are great, phishing is great, brute force is great, but if I can go straight to your website and just enter in a specific command that, you know, maybe I was presented with a login with a username and password, there are ways that I can put a fancy username in there and just hit enter, and I'll bypass all of your authentication. So if your program isn't hardened against those types of attacks, I can bypass all of your authentication. I'm now in as the administrator, and I can dump the entire content of your database, all without compromising your network. I don't have to break in if I can just access it. So we've got this initial foothold now in the environment. What do the bad guys do next? They start to move around. Their ultimate goal is to get domain administrator privileges, and that's like the top boss. That's where permissions no longer matter, because the domain administrator has all permissions. He can do everything he wants. She can go anywhere she wants. So once a bad guy has an initial foothold in your environment, they're going to start moving from machine to machine to machine until they can find domain administrator credentials. And usually they find those cached on the machine, and that's a technical term. But basically what it means is when you log in every day, your computer saves your login information so that when you log in tomorrow, it doesn't take as long for you to log in. The machine's already expecting it. So they do this lateral movement through several different things here. Through weak authentication, if I can connect to another workstation and I find that Bob has a weak password, I can log in with that. Poor firewall controls, if I can move throughout the entire network without being inhibited by a firewall, that gives me more targets of opportunity. Credential harvesting, I've posted some screenshots of actual real tools that we use, both the good guys and the bad guys use for breaking into other computers once we're inside the network. The top left one is called PowerShell Empire. The bottom one is called Metasploit, and the one on the right is called Mimikatz, and it's a particularly depressing tool. We used it in a class a few months ago, a couple of years ago actually, and it basically dumps all of the usernames and passwords. They're stored in a computer right out in plain text for the bad guy to see. So we established the initial foothold. We then move from computer to computer to computer until we find the domain admin credentials, and we escalate ourselves to domain administrator. At this point, for you as the network owner, your barn is on fire. The horse left 3 years ago. Your barn's on fire. That fire is on fire, and you have a very serious problem. Whether or not you know it yet, that kind of depends on how noisy the bad guys want to be. And this comes down to how noisy they want to be, comes down to their motivations. If they want to fire off ransomware and hold you hostage, then you're going to know that pretty quick. But if they're a nation state and they're there to spy on you and steal your information, then they're going to be as quiet as they can so they don't get detected. So I'm now the domain administrator. I then proceed to enumerate or list all of the different machines in the environment. And I can simply do that by going through Active Directory. and that's a technical term for all the system administrators. It's sort of a central database that keeps track of everything in your Windows network. So once I have a list of all the hosts, I then distribute my malware to them. Now, if I'm a ransomware actor, then that means that malware is going to be the actual cryptoware that's going to lock your machines and display the fancy messages on your screen. If I am an intelligence related actor from a nation state, then that malware is probably going to be some sort of a backdoor that allows me to get in later. And if I'm an intelligence operative, this is a great time for me to go explore for what I call cool stuff. Cool stuff can be anything that I might find value in. I can either sell it on the dark web, so credit cards is a great one. I saw that we have an e-commerce site at the Matsu Borough, so I'd go looking for credit cards. And depending on how the network is architected, I may or may not be able to get those. Sitting here today listening to the sharing of data for the smart communities, another type of cool stuff that occurs to me is some of the GIS information. Yeah, a lot of this stuff is supposed to be public, but maybe some of it shouldn't be. So if I am a foreign state actor, maybe some of this stuff could be of interest to me, maybe not for right now, but maybe later on, and we'll just tuck it away for 10 years or so until we actually need that data. And we'll cover that here in a minute too. I'm also going to disable your backups if I'm a ransomware actor. Ransomware bad guys, once they get in and they get domain admin, that's the very next thing they're going to do is go for your backups and disable them. Why? Because you're much more likely to pay the ransom if you don't have any backups. Yeah, we already covered the intelligence. Motivations. What do you think the primary motivation of all hacking on the planet is? Any guesses? What? Renown, okay. Yeah, absolutely. What's another one? Money. Who said money? Absolutely. Yeah, so most of the hacking today is driven by money, by financial greed. They just want to line their pockets. It wasn't really made super public, but over the last couple of years, the entire worldwide banking network has been under heavy attack. Specifically what's called their SWIFT network, where they transfer money back and forth between banks. It's been attacked. And the bad guys have stolen untold millions of dollars straight from the banking system. So I guess they drive fancy cars now. Economic espionage. There's two different types of espionage in the cyber hacking world, economic and industrial. Industrial espionage within the United States is where U.S. company A breaks into U.S. company B and steals their trade secrets for fun and for profit. So if Coke were to break into Pepsi and steal the secret recipe, that would be industrial espionage. That's also super illegal, and if Coke gets caught doing that, a lot of folks go to jail. Economic espionage, which, by the way, industrial espionage doesn't really happen at a significant level within the United States. Outside in other countries, yeah, it's a little more prevalent. Economic espionage is where people from one country break into a business owned in another country. So somebody from, I won't pick on Russia, China, or Iran, because they're always doing it. Somebody from Brazil hacks into a small business in Talkeetna, Alaska, and steals their design for, have you guys ever seen the little moose nugget jewelry? Yeah, so that's actually a true story. They had their design stolen, actually it was by the Chinese. So you can now go buy from Chinese shops little moose nugget jewelry, and they had their designs ripped off straight from the actual, I forget what the name of the company was in Talkeetna, still there. So that's economic espionage, because the damage that results from it actually results in losses to a country as a reduction in their gross domestic product. So yeah, who said renown? Yeah, impress your friends. I was tempted to put up there impress girls because a lot of these kids are 16 years old that are doing this for renown. Renown really isn't noticeable on a large scale. There's still a lot of hacking that goes on in universities. And so yeah, college kids doing that. So absolutely, that's a valid driver. But the other one is geopolitical advantage. And I touched on this earlier, I hinted at it. We have seen now, I want to say 3 different times where the Russian government preceded a military action with a cyber action. So in Estonia, before they invaded Estonia, they turned all the lights out and turned off the phones. It makes it a lot harder for your army to operate if they can't see in the dark and they can't call anyone else for help. So, and I'm oversimplifying that, but they did the same thing in South Georgia before the tanks rolled in. Before they invaded Ukraine, they did the same thing. They turned off the telecommunications and I think all the power as well. So as you're looking at your data, keep in mind, what kinds of data a foreign government might be interested in. Maybe not for today, but maybe for later on. All right, so that's the bad news. Now let's get to the good stuff. This is the stuff where we really like to work in this area. Prevention, right? We want to keep the bad guys out. And that's really our top goal. Unfortunately, prevention failed about 20 years ago. And frankly, it was a flawed concept to begin with. And what happened was companies, back in the 90s, if you had a firewall and you had antivirus software, then you were good to go. And no one could hack in. But today's world is so much different. We have mobile devices, we have cloud services, we have phishing attacks all the time. So bad guys just hop over the firewall, compromise your internal machine, and they own you anyways, and your firewall's still fat, dumb, and happy. And I, of course, show a picture of a broken firewall, but in reality, they don't even touch the firewall, they just go around it. So if prevention doesn't work, what do we need to aim for? And that's really a new model of detection and containment from the bad guys. So we want to be able to see, first of all, we need to plan for attacks to occur. If we do that, then it helps to eliminate kind of I won't say an attitude of complacency, because no one ever sets out to be complacent in their job. But if you have this model of prevention and you have all these security tools in place to prevent, you tend to get mentally lazy and you rely too much on the tools and the bad guys sneak in. So if we plan for intrusions to occur, mentally we're a lot more on our toes. The main goal is to make the attacker have to work harder and to slow them down. And then that gives us the ability to be able to see them. If we can see them quickly, obviously, the quicker we can detect the bad guys, the better off we're going to be. So that's the top goal. And then limit the damage, and then recover from the attack. So that's really that's really the strategy that we need to be driving towards. And then once the attack is over, and I think the Matsu Bureau is doing an awesome job of this. We need to go back and do a debrief, figure out what happened, and how can we defend against our environment better in the future. So here's some ideas for actual strategy, for implementation. First of all, risk analysis needs to drive all mitigation efforts. And when I say mitigation, risk mitigation. So sit down, inventory your information assets, and I say assets, fancy words. Look at what all types of information you have are, and try and classify them into, oh, this is absolutely public stuff. There's no need to protect this, except availability-wise, but there's no need to keep it secret. Up to, I know that some, at least I hope, some electric utilities might keep some of their infrastructure secret. Make it non-public. Everybody doesn't need to know where you keep, where your electrical lines are buried, where your fiber optic cables are buried. They don't necessarily need to know that. Yeah, the dudes that dig need to know that, but somebody logging in from China shouldn't be able to download that stuff from your database. And then implement a security management program that takes the risks that you've identified in your environment and map those to actual solutions. So here's some of the mitigating solutions. First and foremost, have a data breach or cyber attack insurance policy out there. And I'm going to skip through a few of these. I think we're running a little bit tight on time. Definitely have an insurance policy out there. For email, here's for any system administrators that might be in here, or if you know some, if your organization receives an email from the internet, have your IT admins pre-pen the subject line with the word external or something like that, so that you know when you get the email from CFO Bob that says, hey, wire this $3 million to this account in Nigeria, if it says external on the email, that's a really good clue that probably Bob, the CFO, didn't send that to you. Somebody else did. Then another thing that I was really pleased to see, Eric, was the two-factor authentication up there. Any remote access to websites, et cetera, that contain sensitive information, you should have two-factor authentication enabled for. It really slows the bad guys down. It's not perfect, but it definitely helps. Let's see, limit data sharing for partners via firewalls. If you have a data feed between the Mat-Su Borough and the state of Alaska, configure your firewalls so that that data feed is only accessible between the two entities. And me as a cyber hacker can't connect to the Mat-Su Borough's data feed service and get a copy of it as well. Anyone know who that gentleman is there? Total side note. So his hacker name is Mudge. And I think in about 1998, that's a picture of him testifying before Congress how he could shut down the entire internet in 6 seconds. And he wasn't lying. Another mitigating strategy is to change your firewall policy to prevent all outbound traffic from your environment. And the idea here is, and this can't be done easily, but it can be done. The idea here is that if an initial foothold is established by the bad guys, it makes it super hard for them to communicate back out from that internal machine and download more of their hacker utilities. Redefine your backup solutions so they're impervious to attack. That's kind of a whole talk on its own. Incident response plan, figure out what you're going to do when the bad guys do succeed in getting in. Have visibility into your network, and that means logs, and everybody hates logs, and I don't blame them. But enable logging for your infrastructure devices, that's routers and switches and firewalls, et cetera, servers, certainly any remote access into your environment, enable logging for that, and then also consider enable logging in some cases for your actual endpoint workstations. Do some automated log monitoring, because no human being can ever read that much log data, at least not and keep your sanity. Vulnerability testing, perform some security testing of both your internal and external networks. If you need help with that, there's lots of security testers out there on the internet. Come talk to me later. I can point you to some good ones. It's a service we also offer. Another shameless marketing plug there. Network traffic sniffing, have the ability to actually look at your network traffic inside your network. Perform some network intrusion detection technology. Stick some machines on your firewall to the internet connection and watch for the bad traffic. And it'll pick up any sort of intrusion attempts and send those as alerts to your log monitoring system. Web traffic malware analysis. Essentially, all of your internal machines, because they can now no longer go directly to the internet, they need to go through what's called a proxy server. And that proxy server reaches out to the internet and downloads the content that you're pulling from Facebook or Google or wherever, and it looks at that for bad stuff, and it'll filter the bad stuff out. Cloud threat intelligence integration. Training is a big one. For everybody, for employees, et cetera, social engineering, attack training, business email compromise training, things like that. But send your system admins, send your security admins to security school. it's kind of setting them up for failure if you tell your top admin that he's now responsible for security and you don't give him the training that he needs. So, questions? I know that I just gave you a Mach 30 overview of security, but yes, Eric.
Yeah, so this is all great. It's all very expensive. So for organizations that can't afford all the tools, how can we do it?
Yeah.
How do we afford all this when we have a small organization?
Yeah, did everyone hear Eric's question? It was that for smaller organizations, all this stuff sounds really cool, but it costs a lot of money. How do smaller businesses, smaller organizations implement effective security? And the answer comes back to that risk analysis. So you start looking at your assets, you assign a risk level to them, you look at the overall operation and what you're trying to offer, the information that you own, and you have to do a risk analysis of each area of your network and each different information type. And then based on that risk analysis, that will tell you what areas of your network you need to protect a little bit more, and it'll also show you areas of your network that you don't have to spend as much money on. And that will drop the cost significantly. If you just go in and apply everything that I said across the board, you'll be spending way too much money on security. And at the end of the day, you're gonna miss the boat anyways, because there's gonna be something in your network that you missed because you didn't do that initial risk analysis. Thane.
We run into situations where a company is going after a contract, a small company is going after a contract with a large company, and they have to meet specific security requirements in order to qualify. Have you run into situations where that occurs, and is there a solution that might be cost-effective for them to qualify, or is it too complex?
You know, it's not so much smaller vendors competing with bigger vendors and having to comply with security requirements. The security requirements are set forth by the offerer. So like in the federal government, they have specific standards that you have to meet in order to get that contract. So if you as a small business can show that you're compliant with those standards, then you should be good to go. And there are very creative ways to implement effective security and meet these standards without spending $1 million. Did that accurately answer your question?
Yeah, it sounds like there's resources out there to have the small businesses take.
Any other questions? All right. Oh, yes. Oh, man. So the question was, when it comes to detecting bad guys, what are the most common indicators? That's actually an entire talk in and of itself. But at a super high level, if you see, who here didn't watch Sesame Street as a kid? Good, okay. So for the most part, we've got it. Do you all remember this? Which one of these things is not like the other? So the trick in security is to figure out which one of these things is not like the other. And what I mean is, Doug checks his email every day from his desktop, and he authenticates to the Exchange server 8 to 5 every day. And then he goes home, and he does that from his MTA DSL connection. I know Doug lives in Wasilla, so I'm guessing. Could be a cable modem too, I guess. But the point is that if you have the network visibility established within your environment, you'll be able to see these things happening. And then if all of a sudden one day Doug is checking his email from a dial-up connection in Argentina, well, that's kind of odd. And so maybe we ought to call Doug and ask him if he's on vacation. And if he's not, then you have an issue. So bad guys, regular employees, a regular business doesn't function like a bad guy. They function like a business. They function like an employee. So bad guys, when they come in, they don't act like other regular legitimate employees. They act like bad guys. So you'll see connections from workstation to workstation to workstation. You'll see direct authentications or desktop logins, remote logins to a domain controller from a workstation that belongs to Debbie in accounting. and she has no business logging into a domain controller. So it'll be anomalous things like that, and you have to have the visibility first in your network, and then you have to tune your detection tools to be able to see that. So yeah, that's a huge, huge answer though to a pretty, it should be a simple question, but it never is. Any other questions?
That's all the questions on cybersecurity today.
All right, awesome. Thank you very much, guys.
All right, thanks so much. There's I know, a ton of questions, and show of hands, does anyone here actually encounter work? I don't think you're security pros, but work with a security group on your projects or your work in your organization? Show of hands. Yeah, more so and more so. I mean, my first time with encountering security, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, and I was actually implementing a database activity monitoring system, and I had to get through my own organization's security and risk management division. And that was a little tricky. I said, well, I'm doing what you want to use to analyze the application that I'm trying to put in. So we got kind of stuck in a little bit of a catch-22. So they had to actually kind of overlook some things so I can put a tool in place that they could actually do their job to do security analysis. Anyway, upcoming conferences, just real quick. We're actually on time, so I appreciate everybody's help to kind of speed things up. All these presentations will be on our website, at the forum website that I'll highlight here in a second. I just want to make sure, I call out some opportunities for you guys they're all out of state, but they're actually in fairly nice locations, so if you wanted to check them out. A couple weeks from now, city launch, again, smart communities and smart cities conferences. One coming up in March, this one's up in April. I'm trying to recall, I think this might be Colorado. And then another one, this is again San Diego, and this is in mid-April. So they come up rather regularly. You see a common theme, but I'll have, the links are actually set up on the forum website. So if you're interested in them, check them out, or you can frankly just probably Google smart cities or smart communities and see them. But great opportunities. I've not been to one, but talk about this type of topic for 3 or 4 days and pull a lot of ideas together. We've made some changes to the Smart Community website the last, actually, week. So from Jack at Matsu Burrow and one of our folks at my firm, we've got this kind of refreshed up. So you'll find some sponsors that we've had in the past forums for the last couple of years, participating organizations. A lot of you are on that list, just a list of who's been participating in most of the forums. On the far right is the events, and so I just kind of scrolling through the next 3 to 4 different events that are coming up in a calendar that I find, then I'll go ahead and post. So if there's something else that you think people ought to know about or should post, I'll go ahead and tee it up on the calendar, and then it'll scroll through and show the next 3 and 4 here. You can also go to the calendar and find whatever I've posted through next October so far. So if you know of something and you want to advertise it here for people who do visit the site, let me know. There's also a link on the right-hand side. You'll find recordings for all the forums for the past year, including this one today, hosted by Radio Free Palmer, and our friend Mike here has been streaming and recording these events for the past year or so. So Mike, appreciate the help on that.
This one will be, the video for this should be up. Should you provide the link? It's up there now, actually.
Mm-hmm. All right, and it's kind of slick because you can actually pick which section that you want to see in each of the events, particular topics during that particular forum. And then recent news, and then local data portals, a number of the ones that we talked about today, and further down to the right, you'll find a number of the either presenters and their sites or topics that we presented in prior forums. The homeless to housing application and workflow presentation, for example, and others like that. So they've been buried in emails for a couple of years, not very handy. So we've got this site refreshed, and also you can see on the top navigation partners that we've identified, that we talked about a little bit today. And then obviously the documents, and I'll put an email out to just remind you, but the documents are all the presentations from all the prior forums indexed by the forum date, okay? So a lot of information out there, probably 50 some odd documents that are out there. So I want to make sure I highlight that, and then the upcoming dates, April 30th, August 13th, and November 14th are the forums that I've already set up and scheduled at the different places, BP Energy for the next two, and then we'll be back in Palmer in the fall. And then topic ideas. I have a couple of ideas for April 30th already around transportation, but these are just ideas. We normally would just talk about this, but I want to let you go. If you have ideas about what you'd like to see at one of these forums, I'm all ears. I don't get a lot of emails. I don't get a lot of emails from you all. But I'd love to have, I come up with these ideas, I'll ping a few of you. We have an advisory group that we've met infrequently for the past year. If you're interested in being a dozen or so people that want to get on a call with me and discuss topics and how to, for the next several forums, love to have you. So just email me or just give me a call. I'll get you on a conference call and we'll talk about these next ideas. But there's a couple things brewing, both in Muni and the Mat-Su around transportation coordination. Obviously, disaster response, particularly after the earthquake. We talked about utilities and sharing of information. I want to talk more about with MTA, MEA, perhaps Chugach Electric, MLP, and even Alaska Water and Wastewater. And then just continue building those partnerships. We've tried to do a little bit of that. We're on the cusp of that. We have something drafted with Palmer, and I think we're going to model that for Wasilla as well for a little bit of an app sharing kind of goal that we have to share, for example, the Problem Reporter app, and also workflow automation. Maybe we can share a little bit more about how that trash app works in Mat-Su or any other things that you're automating and improving for your agencies and departments. Love to hear the ideas. So I appreciate everyone being here. Thanks so much. And I want to appreciate the opportunity to be part of the survey conference. Terry brought this up to me about a month or two ago, and so I changed from BP to this facility here. This has been great to be on the beginning edge, the morning of the rest of the week for the mapping and survey conference. So it's been a great opportunity because I get to come on the cusp of this, be able to use this facility, and then the Hilton's been able to provide the food here, and obviously sponsored this particular event by the Mat-Su Borough. So again, thank you Mat-Su Borough, and thank you for everyone.